The story begins with a shining lantern in the night and a girl who was walking home, but then she was attacked by something in the form of a burning monster. In the morning, the news reported that several supernatural events had occurred in the city in recent days. A woman was attacked on her way home last night. The girl, humming to herself, was carrying a teapot in her hands, but then a guy grabbed her, calling a girl named Lu Shu. The guy looked at her incredulously and had to give up. Because the girl couldn't even leave the medicine alone, was she seriously so hungry? Lu Shu replied to the young man that she only wanted to take one sip, but the young man was persistent and told the girl to come quickly and apologize to Aunt Lin. But Lu Shu was so hungry that she couldn't even move. The young man, clearing his throat, decided to ask if Lu Shu really wanted to eat so much, and the young man remembered that there seemed to be carrots in the house. Zhonghu residents describe carrots as ginseng root, showing Lu the roots on a tray, the young man said. The girl believed that the young man therefore looked like a dried carrot and that the girl did not want to be like her. The young man could not understand what the girl wanted then. She wanted instant noodles, but they couldn't afford them now, but maybe in the new year they will be able to eat them. The young man laughed. The girl replied that she wanted at least a little noodles. The young man, looking at her, said that Lu Shu dreams too much. Lu Shu got angry and started asking Lu Shu to give her a small walnut in return if he couldn't give her noodles. But holding the girl, he explained that it was not a nut. The young man had been wearing it since he got into an orphanage, so he was not going to give his nut to her. Lu Shu, saying that Lu Shu had changed a lot and forbade her a lot, bit his hand. Surprised by her actions, the young man agreed to go and buy her what she wanted. But as soon as he said that he would buy her noodles, the girl immediately wanted a delicious beef stew. There were 2 delicious dishes on the table and the woman offered Shu to wait, because she had almost finished frying, and her brother would return soon and they would eat together. There was exactly half a portion per person in the plate. Then if Shu looked at the darkening sky, he would get an extra piece. Thinking about how thin her brother Lu Shu was, she decided to share a piece with him. Because they could only eat meat once, Lu Shu decided to be generous. She laughed and considered herself good, but she did not put more than 3 pieces to her brother because the rest was for herself. But Lu still didn't come back, and it was getting cold outside. The girl didn't like it. Lu Shu stood and photographed the fireworks, hoping that next year he would be able to give Shu a real salute. Then turning his head, he saw a truck coming at him. The young man thought about his promises that he had not fulfilled in front of Shu, and just thinking about his demise, the nut that was always with him opened up. The broken phone lay nearby. The fireworks continued to appear in the sky. Notifications came to the phone, because the young man managed to send a photo to his sister, but she could not get an answer. Lu Shu, the main character of this story. His story hasn't started yet, but this New Year he died. The man got out of the car and hoped that no one died on this lousy New Year's Day. The young man, getting up from the asphalt, talked about the big problems that this driver would have. Thinking about the guy who got up after such a collision, the man decided that he was facing a ghost. The young man, holding out his hand to the man, said that he would be able to leave only after he reimbursed him, and without finishing, the man disappeared, and the young man thought about why he was still alive and did not feel pain. He returned home and was greeted by Shu, who talked about what auntie had made them with lye meatballs. But looking at her brother, she asked in fright what had happened to him. His appearance was shabby and the young man was looking at her. He explained to his sister that he had been in an accident under a car. The person who was driving was fine, but the car was not. The girl ran after her brother and asked him questions about whether they could pay, whether this car was big, and the young man replied that he had paid with the money he had collected in order to go to the festival with his sister. The girl did not believe him. Then Lu Shu said that he was actually joking and other people got into an accident, and he just helped them. Taking a shower, Lu Shu looked at himself in the mirror and realized that nothing had changed. Only when he looked at his hand, he saw something unusual on the palm of his hand and the screen opened in front of him. He knew it wasn't that simple. He did not believe. Did he really wake up with super abilities, as they used to say in the news? And when he saw the money on the screen, the young man decided that God had become kind to him and gave him a super ability that automatically creates money. He decided that he would use this opportunity to earn money to pay for Lu Shu's education and food for her whole life. And I decided to look at the list of income. He saw the glasses of negative emotions and did not understand where his money was. The young man thought about Zhang Donglai, the owner of the store, and maybe Zhang Jin was a truck driver. Our hero wondered. Then he asked Lu Shu to cook the noodles herself and at the same time make him one too. If the girl also had glasses of negative emotions, and they immediately appeared on the screen. The girl, angry, said that her brother had not changed. Lu Shu thought that ridicule turned into points of negative emotions. Was it possible to withdraw them somehow? He demanded his money, but it seemed that the glasses could only be used in the system. And when he saw the inscription of the casino, which was his personal lottery, he thought that he should win well here. And I began to look at what prizes were here. But the casino only thanked the young man for his participation. He couldn't understand what it meant. His casino couldn't be that bad. The guy did not believe that he could be so unlucky and tried again. He came across a changing fruit that was immediately added to the inventory. Items in the inventory can be withdrawn at any time, the system reported, and he brought out the fruit in the hope that it would not harm him and swallowed it. The young man became insanely hot. The young man thought, what was meant by changes? Changes in his body and meridian. He was looking at himself in the mirror. It looks like the negative emotion points were even better than Yuan. The sister called her brother, saying that the noodles were already cold. Points of negative emotions were added. Since his sister couldn't wait for him anymore, the hero had to hurry up. Sitting down at the table, he saw the noodles that Lu Xiao had cooked. He praised the girl because it was not bad. Lu Xiao asked her brother not to start because he cooked better than she did. He asked her to cook it next time. Xiao was angry, and the points of negative emotions were added. Thanks to this little girl, the young man made a good profit, but he could not continue to bully her. It was snowing outside the window at that moment, and the young man offered to make a snowman as soon as they finished eating. The girl reminded the young man that he had to remember the words where he promised to buy her 2 Tangaloo sticks tomorrow at the festive festival. Lu Shu agreed, but then asked him not to ask about snowmen anymore, whether they are beautiful or not. Xiao was terrified and said that the young man could not speak like that. They were making snowmen and looking at them. The girl asked the young man if these snowmen did not seem to him like themselves. Lu Shu, looking at the snowmen, asked her a question about the future, why Xiao never told him what she wanted to do when she grew up. Then she replied that she wanted to do Tangaloo. The young man was glad that she did not want to become an artist or a sculptor. The girl ran at the young man because he was teasing her. The fire danced in the sky, and the young man held it with his hand while watching his brother and sister having fun in the snow. But when he noticed something, he disappeared. Lu Shu was looking at his phone. Then Xiao asked who her brother was taking care of and why he wasn't worried about his cute little sister at all. Then Lu Shu showed her the phone, and she saw the game message in a bottle. Lu Shu corresponded with a friend and received negative points from him. The sister looked at her brother and touched his forehead. It seemed to her that the young man was behaving strangely, and she thought suddenly he was ill. The young man sent his sister to the room, otherwise she might not even think about tomorrow's festival. The profit from Lu Xiao's negative emotion points has increased. He was thinking that after receiving a couple more messages in the chat, he would be able to play the lottery again. But he was unlucky in the lottery. After 6 unsuccessful attempts, he got a prize. The piece of paper that the young man came across was with an inscription, and he did not understand what it was, asking the system to explain it to him. The inscription read, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, to all the heavens, what a beauty, going beyond the boundaries of mortal worlds. It shines brightly like diamonds at night. When the sun goes down, when nothing shines, the galaxy comes to life, the night is long, and the path cannot be found until the lights go out and the songs are sung." The young man thought about it. Then all these words were repeated again, and light came out of the young man's hand, spinning around him and covering everything with a starry rain. And he saw a starry sky that passed through his chest. The fallen stars created a galaxy in his body, and the young man thought that this starlight could enhance his power. Then the light dissipated, and Xiao knocked on the door and asked if her brother was asleep. He asked if she saw something fall from the ceiling, but her sister replied that she only heard her brother humming a song. The young man, embarrassed, reminded that his sister had to get up early tomorrow and asked not to worry about him. Lu Shu thought that even after singing softly, his sister heard him, so next time he would have to hide from her, otherwise she would definitely laugh at him. It looked like a star atlas. These stars should teach legendary techniques, the young man thought to himself. The next day the sun was shining and the festival began. The brother and sister were at the festival, and for his song yesterday, Xiao wanted to reward him with 2 pieces of her delicacy because the young man sang it very beautifully. To which Lu Shu told the girl what she thought and tried to distract her attention with the actors who were ahead of them. Xiao realized that the young man decided to change the subject. It was so obvious. Lu Shu offered to eat her some more because at least she would be silent. There was a performance in front of them, and when the young man saw the fire, he froze, while his sister complained that she could not see anything through the crowd. In front of them was a young man who controlled the fire, and at that moment I felt an unusual feeling in my chest. The young man, looking at the guy who controlled the fire, thought that maybe he was also awakened. The sister tore her brother away from his thoughts. It was all over, and the girl still didn't see anything, and asked to take her backstage so that she could look at least one eye. The brother agreed, and they went backstage. Behind the scenes, 2 men in suits and glasses were walking towards the young man who controlled the fire. The guy tried to block their way, but they went ahead. Controlling the fire, the young man attacked his attackers, but they deftly dodged his attacks. One of the agents came from behind the young man, attacking him. Then the girl shouted to the agents to leave the young man alone, and why are they catching him? The agents realized that they had been discovered and there were outsiders here. Lu Shu tried to close his sister's mouth, but it was too late. They were discovered. One of the agents explained that this guy did not get permission for a fire performance. He has violated fire safety regulations and they are taking him away for investigation. Lu Shu smiled and thanked the agents for their work, because safety was above all. Lu Shu thought to himself that he was an idiot if he believed what the agents told him, because he had never seen firefighters knock people out and take them away. The young man apologized and said goodbye to the agents, taking his sister out of the tent. Both looked after the young man and one of the agents asked the other if there were any problems, to which he replied that he did not feel any flow of energy. Then it was necessary to return it as soon as possible. Lu Shu led his sister home and thought about where the men in black came from, why the awakened ones were returning. He was lucky they didn't notice a noob like him, and the young man thought that next time he should be more careful. He could not allow himself to be revealed. The sister asked Lu Shu if people were different from them now. The young man answered positively, and I asked my sister that if there are many people in the world now who are stronger than them, what should they do? The girl replied that they should become stronger than these people. Her brother agreed with her. A young man was watching them from around the corner, talking on the phone, which seemed strange to him that this time the agents simply let the witness go. The sister was cheerful and told her brother that he had nothing to worry about, because she would protect him in the future. Then a young man came up to them and greeted them, introducing himself as Jai Y. Lu Shu turned to the new guest and decided to ask him how pleased he was. The young man did not understand why he was being asked about this. Then our hero repeated his question once again, putting his opponent in a stupor. He didn't understand why Lu Shu wasn't reacting. Then, Y asked the guys who had just come from behind the scenes what had happened there. The young man asked to tell him. When Lu Shu came home, he thought about this young man, who may have also researched super abilities. Who was he? He decided he should have been more careful now. Lu Shu reached into his phone to see if there was something about the festival on the web. After seeing a photo from the festival where the guys took pictures opposite the young man who controlled the fire, everyone wrote about the guy that maybe he was a superhero, because he could create fire out of thin air. Someone wrote that super abilities exist and maybe there is a secret superhero in their class too. The young man noticed that those agents were at the festival all the time. It was also obvious that they had come for a guy playing with fire. Xiao Yu also looked at her brother's phone screen and asked him about classmates who were going to class again without him. The young man replied that he had no money to go with them, so he was not invited. The sister pretended that she was sorry and told her brother that she was kind and noble and would play with him alone. The young man asked her to go to bed. Lu Shu watched the correspondence of classmates who were thinking about their carefree time after the tests. Having written a message in the chat, the points of negative emotions of all participants poured on him, and he thought about how beautiful his classmates were. Then suddenly the prophet of negative emotions from the young man Jai Y fell on him. The young man did not understand why he was still offended by him. Jai Y was thinking about how cold it was. There was a man sitting opposite him who was talking about rats prowling around. Why did they go quiet for a few days? And it was because Nai Ting showed up, Jai Y said, showing a photo of himself on the phone screen to a man. Lu Shu was looking at the screen, where for the profit he received, he could only buy a star fruit in the store. And he decided that he would buy it, since there was such an opportunity. Taking the fruit, he felt the energy inside, and thinking to himself that if it is called a fruit in the store, then it is something useful that you can eat. The young man swallowed the fruit, and the power filled him. The first 2 stars in the galaxy lit up, and the young man felt strength. He had never felt so good before. But hitting the floor with his hand, he felt pain. The sister, who came running to the noise, thought that something had fallen. The young man, having lied, said that he had hit his head. His sister asked him to calm down, because he still had to take care of her. Then, looking out the window, Xiao Yu thought that she had imagined it, but it was not so. Xiao Yu called her brother to look, because someone was falling from the sky. Lu Shu replied that it was late and the girl could not walk outside. No matter what was going on, she could not go out and look. Then Xiao Yu grabbed her brother and tucked him to the window, saying that it was serious. Angry brother had already started to say that she could not, but then he stopped his thoughts and saw a young man lying on the ground. Someone really fell out of the sky. Seeing a familiar silhouette, the young man realized who was in front of him, namely the same guy who knew how to control fire, was lying in their yard, and she and her sister went out to look. The girl asked her brother what they should do, whether to save this young man who was lying in front of them. My brother offered to call an ambulance, but he heard that they would have to pay for the call. He decided that it could be said that they did not know who was in front of them and that he would pay himself as soon as he woke up. Then he saw the prophet from Liang Qi's negative emotions. Lu Shu realized that the young man pretended to be unconscious. In the head of the hero there were thoughts about one of the superhumans, which were told in the news. But it seems that the guy just lay there and pretended that he was knocked out. And that meant one thing. Xiao Yu asked her brother if they would bring this young man into the house. Lu Shu also suggested to his sister to drag the young man out of their yard. Otherwise they would not be able to explain how this guy ended up here when he wakes up. The profit from Liang Qi's negative emotions grew. The sister offered her brother to bring water for the young man, but he thought it would be a long time and she could just feed the guy with snow. The profit from negative emotions was growing again. The young man lying on the ground did not understand since when people stopped being naive. And when he woke up, he asked his brother and sister to help him. Lu Shu laid him back on the ground, saying that the young man could not move. Profit from negative emotions Liang Qi plus 800. Liang Qi asked for help to get up, but Lu Shu said that the young man needed rest and did not let him get up. Liang Qi thought the young man was crazy. Lu Shu was glad that the glasses of negative emotions were flowing like a river. But then the guy started using fire. The brother told Xiao Yu to run. And Liang Qi believed that it was the young man's fault that such a situation turned out, but he quickly cooled him down. The sister ran to help and shouted for the young man to let Lu Shu go. Lu Shu was jamming Liang Qi's abilities and after everything asked if he had finished his games. The guy asked to let him go. Then, after saying goodbye, Lu Shu shouted at the last so that the young man would come to them to play again. And then the young man realized that kind people live in the family in which snowmen are made. He was very wrong. Looking in the direction of the fleeing Liang Qi and turning his head to the other side, Shu saw again the agents in black who were running after the guy. He understood that the fire-wielding youth had escaped from them. Lu Shu didn't see any wounds on the guy, and thought about why Liang Qi was so weak. The fire in the center of the city that was earlier. Was it his handiwork? Maybe the young man overexerted himself. My sister asked my brother not to get close to superhumans anymore. The girl believed that if it wasn't for her, her brother would have burned down. My brother asked my sister not to worry about it, and he told her about the secret that he was actually an awakened one too. Not believing his words, the sister asked to make a couple of lights for her. But the young man tried to escape from his sister, saying that he needed to go to bed because tomorrow he would have to sell eggs. School lessons were about to start soon and the young man was asked if he should have already closed the store and gone to class. Lu Shu replied that everything was fine. He had to walk to school from here in just a couple of minutes. They were broadcasting breaking news. There was a fire in the shopping center, which is located along the sandy road. Local experts said that the cause of the fire, which lasted all night, was the improper disposal of explosive materials. Lu Shu looked at the screen and saw the fund. Where this very fund came from, the young man could not understand. And the young man saw on the page all the videos about superpowers blocked on the internet. There were even categories of awakened on this site. Level F, stronger than ordinary people. Level E possessed superpowers. Level D could dodge firearm shots. Level C could resist firearms. Level B could feed energy from heaven and earth. Level A could harmonize with earth and heaven. The young man wondered if these people wanted to publish all the information about the awakened. There was even a video section where anyone could post. Lu Shu didn't understand if it had gone too far. The guys came up to the young man and asked what he was staring at on his phone so much that he didn't even blink. Someone realized that the young man was sitting on the Foundation's website and decided to ask if he also wanted to become awakened. Another said that it was not worth wasting his time on this. It was just that Lu Shu had to admit that he would never be able to become awakened. The guy offered to consider the situation using the example of eggs that Lu Shu was selling. Who will buy eggs except their company? And even if they bought from him, they were just doing him a favor by doing so. Then their conversation was interrupted by the first beauty of the Cao Qingchai school. All the guys around immediately began showering her with compliments, because in front of them was a goddess and just the best student in the whole course. The girl apologized and asked for 1 egg. Lu Shu asked for 1.5 yuan for the egg, giving the money. The girl showed her strength with her hand and Lu Shu realized that there was an awakened one in front of him. The young man was wondering if the girl would be able to feel his energy, but after looking at him, he realized that Cao couldn't feel anything. The guys who talked to our hero before, forgetting about the money, swam after their classmate, but our hero did not forget that they did not pay. Then they forgot about everything, left the money and left. Lu Shu was preoccupied with thoughts about the awakened ones, which were becoming more and more. He should have accelerated his training and tried to get more fruit. It was necessary to collect even more negative emotions in a day. Mentally, the young man asked not to be afraid of his classmates, because he was not so cruel. When she came to class, the girl who sat next to our hero asked the young man about how awakened he would like to be and what kind of power he would choose. The young man replied coldly that he would choose freedom, equality, justice, and legality. The girl said that Lu Shu was really very smart, so it was not surprising that he was the best in their class. Points of negative emotions Linlin plus 76. The guys asked the girl to leave Lu Shu alone, because he will never become awakened. Then the teacher began to tell his students that he hoped they would be able to pay attention to their studies in the new semester and wished them good luck on the exam. A girl named Lin, poking her pen at our hero, asked to give her a look at his answers and thanked the young man in advance, and everyone began to surround Lu Shu with their attention. For him, it was a good opportunity, and after removing the pen, all the guys began to look at his sheet, hoping that he had done everything, but only they wanted to see how they realized that the young man had closed the answers. Points of negative emotions were falling on him from all sides. Everyone was indignant about why he closed the answers from them and were very negative towards Lu Shu. The teacher, who was watching everyone, asked the students not to cheat and concentrate on their answers. One of the students got very angry, thinking that the teacher was accusing him of cheating. He did not understand why the young man took it personally, because no one was talking specifically about him. Lai Kai flared up and broke his desk, energy gushing out of him over the edge. The teacher and the rest of the students, stepping back, watched the situation, and the teacher tried to calm the young man because he did not say anything to him. Lu Shu realized that Lai Kai was awakened. The young man picked up the teacher and told him that he was no longer afraid, and he was not afraid of teachers because he was awakened and he would no longer have to take exams. Lu Shu told the young man that he would break the law if he did what he wanted. But the young man replied that he was 17 years old and would not be put in jail, even if he hit the teacher. Then Lu Shu explained that, given criminal law, if a young man has committed one of the 8 serious crimes, he can be tried to the fullest extent of the law from the age of 14. And for violating the civil code, he could be tried from the age of 16. The number of serious crimes included just intentional infliction of harm to health. The young man wanted to cause intentional harm to health. Saying all this, Lu Shu recommended his classmate to read more. The points of negative emotions were growing. Then Lai Kai pushed the teacher away and picked up the desk, saying that no one should stand in his way. Lu Shu continued to lecture the young man and continued to tell him that Lai Kai, given the rules and regulations of the school, would have to compensate for damage to property if he broke the desk. All the other students watched what was happening in the classroom. Others were already asked to return to their class and continue their studies, otherwise they would be punished. A man in a suit appeared and asked everyone to disperse. Lu Shu noticed that the man looked like those men in black who were chasing a young man who could wield fire. They captured Lai Kai. The young man did not understand why he could not get rid of those who had captured him and what was happening here. Our hero watched as the young man was taken away. Someone nearby from the students thought that the men in black were very cool. Someone didn't understand where they took Lai Kai. One of the students told about the era he had read about. That one day there would come one where superpowers would awaken in people and perhaps he would become like that. Standing in the crowd of students, Lu Shu felt the energy. An excellent student passed by him, whom he had seen in the morning. Immediately, the school announced over the loudspeaker that all students would have to take a blood test and they would have to wait in their classrooms. It was sudden, so Lu Shu was wary. He had a bad feeling. At the same time, looking at the back of the person leaving, he saw a certain symbol. Everyone was sitting in the classroom and the student needed to come forward when his name was called. At the beginning of the class, there were people in dressing gowns standing next to the teacher. Lu Shu understood that after he ate the altering fruit, he became stronger and the blood test would give him away. In front of him were the same people in black, only in doctor's coats. While the teacher was calling another student, Lu Shu was thinking about how he could get out of the classroom. And pretending that he was feeling unwell, he tried to ask the teacher to go to the toilet. The teacher allowed it, but a man in a bathrobe, seeing that the young man was in a hurry, suggested that he be the first to donate blood. Lu Shu tried to get off as best he could, but then his classmate saved him by having a panic attack. Lu Shu already thought that he needed to faint. The girl fell on the desk and passed out, and the man in the bathrobe wasted no time taking her blood. Lu Shu realized that fainting would not help him. While he was reasoning, a man in a bathrobe came up from behind and took blood from our hero. Lu Shu realized that he was doomed. Meanwhile, Lai Kai returned. All his classmates surrounded him. The teacher asked him to sit in his seat. Lai Kai thanked Lu Shu because thanks to him he became awakened. And he told the young man that a special class will be created in the city of Luo, in which such unique students as he will be gathered. A special class was planned to be created at our hero's school, and with the help of a blood test, they will find out who will study in it. All the information was on the internet. Lu Shu was thinking about a special class that they wanted to assemble to train all the awakened together and reached into his phone to read the information. They wrote on the internet that many schools had already conducted such analyses and were going to create special classes. It seemed that the government had begun to recognize the awakened. The whole class was discussing the situation with the awakened, and our hero was thinking about whether he could get into such a class. When he got home, he wanted to tell his sister about it as soon as possible and knocked on her room without waiting for an answer. Then, bursting in, he saw that she was ill. Waking up, the sister called her brother in sweet fried potatoes, which she really wanted. The young man immediately began to interrogate his sister how she got sick. Xiao Yu told her brother that she washed his clothes, which were collected in a week, but the water was too cold. The young man asked his sister to keep a thermometer in her mouth and asked her not to eat it. The thermometer showed 39 degrees. Lu Shu thought about the antibiotics he needed to find, but then another idea came to him. What if the altering fruit could strengthen Xiao Yu's physical condition and improve his abilities? He turned the wheel and at first thought that he got a broken system, because he could not win anything and she only thanked the young man for participating. But then he won the fruit. Bringing the fruit to his sister, he asked the girl to eat it. The girl was happy that her brother gave her something delicious, but then she realized that she had not even tasted the taste of what her brother had given her. The fruit immediately affected her, as our hero thought. Then the sister asked Lu Shu where he got this fruit from. Was it possible that the brother was awakened? The young man admitted that he was different from the Lu Shu he was before. The brother asked the sister if she would like to become awakened. Did she want to wake up? Xiao Yu answered positively to his question, and then the young man promised that he would find a way. Then his sister made fun of him again about the song about the little star that the young man once sang in his room. He pretended that he did not understand her and asked her to go to bed. Holding fruits in his hand, our hero thought about them and that the star fruit can provide him with star energy for 15 days. Then the changing fruit can increase the effectiveness of his training for 9 days. Only after our hero eats the changing fruit, he will be able to speed up his pumping. The young man could accumulate constellations even faster. Given the current situation, the changing fruit is exactly what they needed with their sister. Lu Shu decided that he had to strengthen Xiao Yu's condition to prepare her for awakening. The young man counted on classmates, with the help of whom he could get a sufficient amount of changing fruits. Arriving at school the next day, Lu Shu, who had been training all night, was not tired even without sleep. The girl who was sitting with him earlier told the young man that now they want to announce those who will be able to enroll in a special class. Lu Shu started talking about democracy and freedom again. His neighbor looked at the young man uncomprehendingly, saying that times had changed and there was no need to study anymore. At that moment, an unknown girl entered the classroom. She exuded energy. The guys in the class saw her and started talking about beauty, and Lu Shu's neighbor thought that the girl was not so beautiful. She stood next to the teacher while he started talking. The teacher explained to the students that the city authorities had decided to create a special Daoyang class at the school in order to gather the most gifted students in it and conduct their education and training, and introduced the class teacher Daoyang, the girl who had entered the class earlier. Those whose name will be on the list should get up and meet their new teacher. And the teacher started calling names. Our hero's name was also on the list and Lu Shu stood up, but not immediately to let his classmates know that they had heard everything correctly. The points were added, and the young man silently thanked all the guys on behalf of Xiao Yu. The girl, the new teacher, introduced herself as Xi Fei, now the class teacher of the class Daoyang. Some of the students, whose name was called, had to attend culture lessons and report on the work done at 7 p.m. With these words she left the office. Those who did not get into the class were very jealous of the other students, because they had such a beautiful teacher. Neighbor Lu Shu congratulated the young man on joining a special class. The young man decided to share the secret with the girl. She was happy, because she hoped that he could not just leave her alone. Lu Shu jokingly uttered some words, thereby angering his neighbor. Glasses rained down on the young man, and he only thought about how Xiao Yu could wake up with this. The teacher announced the exchange students that they had come to the school because of the formation of the Daoyang class and asked the guys to move to new places to greet the newcomers. And the blonde was the first to enter the class. Everyone was in love at first sight with the foreigner who was in front of them. The new student, seeing Lu Shu, asked the teacher to sit next to him. The voice surprised our hero. Lu Shu's neighbor did not want to give up her seat, but the teacher thought that the girl was voluntarily giving up her seat and a new student could take it. And the blonde thanked the girl. She agreed out of embarrassment and said goodbye to Lu Shu, sitting next to the young man. The new student asked the guy how he was, and he accidentally mimicked her and asked the same thing, thinking that it came out by accident. The young man received new points of negative emotions from Shui. Our hero forgot that the new child is an unusual person. Then the blonde introduced herself as Jiang Shui, from Zhang, and that she was a guy. All the boys in the class looked at him in shock. If you look closely, it was really a guy. Glasses of negative emotions appeared again from Shui. The young man noticed that our hero was looking at him to determine the gender. Lu Shu greeted the young man and introduced himself to him. The young man smiled and doubts crept up to our hero that the newcomer could like his appearance. There were pillows on the floor in the classroom. Our hero, seeing the pillows, thought about the special Dao techniques that they would be taught. The new teacher handed out documents so that the children could get acquainted and sign them. A non-disclosure document was in front of Lu Shu. The leakage of information from the Daoyang class will be controlled by military structures. This meant that perhaps a special class wanted to train an army of awakened ones. The teacher asked the class if anyone guessed why the Daoyang class was formed and could someone explain it. One of the students answered about techniques. The teacher then asked another question. Why then they chose those who were in front of her? There was silence in the classroom. She asked the question again, this time about the sodium-potassium alloy. Perhaps one of the students had heard about it. After asking about what sodium is, she poked her finger at Lu Shu, saying that he would answer. The surprised young man began to speak, having said that sodium is a magical heavenly path and thereby caused points of negative emotions from the teacher. Sodium is a chemical element. By chance, it was known that sodium has other uses, namely to measure the blood reaction to Chi, also known as potential. Usually sodium had a silver color, and as soon as the sodium-potassium alloy is exposed to the blood of a person with a unique potential, it changes its color to black. The stronger the potential, the richer the black color. The potential was divided into 6 levels: A, B, C, D, E, F. The potential alone is not enough to achieve success, and for training, people must have willpower. If one of the students became hard, he could leave. The training of the Daoyang class is much more important than what the students learned from the very beginning. In her hands, the teacher held a list in which the level of potential of each of those present in the class was indicated, and she was going to announce it. There was no one present at level A. Level B was Lu Lai, level F was Lu Shu. The young man thought that it was only to his advantage, because when the blood was taken, at that time he had not yet eaten the changing fruit, so it was not his final potential. The men in black will also watch him less. One of the students asked the teacher if anyone had an A level at school, and the teacher named the student Cao Qingchai, who was the only one with such a level. Lu Shu remembered her. Night came. The young man was at home and thought about his 5,000 points of negative emotions, with which he would be able to buy only 5 changing fruits. He didn't like the system at all. One fruit was for Xiaoyu. Then it vibrated in the young man's hand and information appeared in front of him. The changing fruit has reached the highest usage limit. From that moment on, the changing fruit will be moved to the store's storage and will no longer appear in the lottery. The young man happily thought that as long as he had negative emotion points, he would be able to buy an unlimited amount of fruit. He will even be able to buy it for a small fish, if this fruit could be stored for a long time. Then the young man had the opportunity to sell it and get rich. But how long it would last, it was still necessary to experiment. Lu Shu came to his sister's room and asked her to come out, because he had something delicious for her. 6 hours after withdrawal, the effect of the fruit began to weaken. The young man began to think that with the help of this fruit it would not be possible to get rich. Then the door opened, and the sister ate what her brother gave her and shut herself in the room again. But the young man did not give up and continued to knock on her door. An angry Xiaoyu asked what else he wanted from her. The points of negative emotions increased again. The young man showed her more fruits, and she began to eat them. The young man believed that after these changing fruits, Xiaoyu would become even more talented. The girl asked Lu Shu what he gave her. Then the young man explained that it was something to seize her potential, because she wanted to become awakened. He explained to his sister that he would tell her everything a little later and she would understand what it was. Xiaoyu thought to herself that what her brother was giving her was very expensive and asked him not to strain so much. The young man said that he did not get sick after eating this fruit, and stroked the girl on the head. Then Lu Shu asked what Xiaoyu had learned yesterday and asked to bring a book. He would check it. She shouldn't have thought about being able to relax after the spring festival. After all, what will she do when she is 16 and she will not be able to keep up with the pace of learning? The girl had to study, even if she became awakened. And she also had to develop her critical thinking. She had to become more educated. Points of negative emotions were added again. After slamming the door, Xiaoyu said she would sleep, and the young man told her that she could not dream of being able to avoid study, because he would find a way to earn some money and the girl would go to school earlier. And smiling, the young man went to his room. According to the results of the last test, our hero had a potential level of F, and now the measuring fruit has reached its highest limit of use. Already 5 stars were burning. Then Lu Shu remembered what happened in class. Teachers asked about the Foundation's website. Did they write the truth on it? Sci Fei talked about the levels. It was a universal system for categorizing awakened people all over the world. If the awakened one is not born with a rank, he must advance through the levels again and again. The maximum impact force of the awakened F level is 1,200 kilograms. The E level is 2,400 kilograms, so does he have a 2,400 kilograms impact force now? Lu Shu was thinking about his rank. Maybe he had already reached the E level, or maybe the D rank. Now our hero has the opportunity to find out his real level. He looked at the system and thought that new buns could now appear in the lottery, which would be even better because the changing fruit was gone. Spinning the lottery, the young man prayed that he would not get thank you for participating. Then an incomprehensible sponge fell out to him, exuding fragrance. It was lying on the floor. The young man sat down and touched it. It was something slippery and he decided to try something similar to tofu. Was it good tofu? Angry at the system, the young man asked her to sober up, because she was not a roadside stall, and tofu was smelly, not good, and he did not understand why he needed it. Points of negative emotions from Xiao were added. She smelled the aroma of tofu and was angry at her brother, covering her nose with her hands. Approaching her brother, the girl asked if he had been beaten, to which her question seemed strange to him because there was something else. The smelly tofu was held in Lu Shu's hands, and they both decided to try it. Taking a piece and slowly chewing, Xiao gave the first reaction, saying that it was very tasty. But the young man did not understand her admiration, because in front of him was an ordinary smelly tofu. The girl was asking about the power of awakening, which turned into food. After that, she wanted a fruit from pancakes. Her brother answered her that he was not a restaurant, as she thought. The young man was hungry, but he had to smile and not give up in any case, and he decided to continue. And instead of thank you for participating, the system gave the young man smelly tofu every time. Soon these boxes filled the entire space. And why the path to awakening was so difficult, the young man was indignant. The girl was happy with the smelly tofu, because it was the same as it was sold outside. And then it dawned on the young man, he can sell it. And thanking his sister, the young man went to sell it the next day, thereby earning points of negative emotions from others. The seller, who knew the young man, asked if anything had happened to him. The young man replied to Uncle Wang with gratitude and offered to try the stinky tofu that he made. At first, the uncle did not appreciate what Li had cooked, but then this smell, which was so tender and delicious combined with the right sauce, decided that it would be in demand and praised the guy. Lu Shu told his uncle that he would sell this smelly tofu, and he could sell tea eggs again, because more than a year ago, Uncle Wang removed tea eggs from sale for the sake of the young man, and this slowed down the development of his business. The uncle said that he just remembered when he looked at the young man that he had once been the same. Uncle Wang, looking at the young man, thought that it was not easy for him now, and he would like to take care of the future of young people. It was enough that it would remain in the young man's heart. And inspired by Lu Shu, he started selling his stinky tofu, 5 yuan apiece. Passers-by looked at the young man and turned up their noses at the smell. Selling tofu, the young man earned not only money, but also a lot of points of negative emotions. It was a victory that he rejoiced in. The guys in the class whispered about the weak potential of our hero and that the young man might soon be suspended. The new neighbor told Lu Shu not to worry, because the teacher said that as long as Lu Shu has perseverance, his training will be successful. Our hero looked at his neighbor and tried to understand. The guy wanted to comfort him, and while he was looking, they met eyes. Then, embarrassed by the look of Shui, our hero told his neighbor that he looked like a girl and asked if someone had already written him a love note. Correcting myself that guys don't count, only girls. Ling Ling was sitting behind him, and the glasses of negative emotions were falling towards the young man, and he realized that there was some misunderstanding. Ling Ling looked with contempt at the blonde man who took her place. Then the teacher came into the classroom and asked Lai Qingyu to get up. The guy got up, and our hero was interested in what happened. Lai Qingyu has been away for a while. Then all the classmates saw that the young man was returning to class. He came in drooping, and everyone realized that there was nothing good at the conversation he was taken to. Discussions began in the classroom that someone had been kicked out in class 2 for violating confidentiality. Some people from the class woke up after being suspended. As a result, they were taken by the men in black. Our hero was thinking about the men in black, whether they had a tradition to take people suddenly. And then an idea came to him. For the whole class, our hero asked why the young man did it. Namely, he told everyone about the potential of each of those present in the class. He will now be kicked out for this. The imagination of the young man to whom he said it was all Lu Shu played out, and he cried with tears in his eyes that it was all untrue and ran away from the classroom. Lu Shu thought to himself that it was true after all, what he had said earlier. Classmates did not understand why Lu Shu bullied the young man, but he did all this in order to achieve success, because that's how he gained points of negative emotions. It was evening in the Dao Yong class. Zai Fei put down a book that was a textbook for beginners, and she looked at the guys in front of her. Then she noticed our hero and immediately asked him a question about sodium. As the first time, the young man replied that it was a magical heavenly path. Points of negative emotions were immediately added, and the teacher said that she would tell them the answer to this question herself. The young man thought that Fei was afraid of repeating that stupid situation, so she didn't even try to ask him anything. And the teacher began to tell that 17 months ago Reiki was reborn, and every day there were more and more awakened ones. The world was different now from what it had been before. The sodium-potassium alloy that she held in her hands. Many new properties of various metals were revealed after the revival of Reiki. It was even possible to make a weapon. This includes metal. With the rebirth of Reiki, there is a huge amount of materials that can be used. They will become a necessary prop for every person in the future. And with these words, she put the alloy in her blouse. Although it was impossible to compare materials with artifacts, because, given the properties of these materials, they can be put into mass production. Everyone will have the opportunity to purchase these weapons in the future. But, of course, not everyone can do it. Lu Shu wondered if his system could create weapons and why our hero constantly had the feeling that the system was unreliable. And he imagined himself with a smelly tofu and a stick in his hands, against rivals with weapons. Evening came, and the young man was deciding what to do. If he sells 50 tofu, then he will have a profit of 250 yuan and he will be able to take Xiao Yu to the cinema, sitting on boxes of stinky tofu. He turned the wheel endlessly and only this tofu fell out to him all the time. And after trying the lottery again, he came across something new. The young man was delighted. Xiao Yu came into the room just at the moment when our hero was crawling through tofu for his new prize from the lottery. And the leaf that was the same prize, having come into contact with his sister, created an abnormal state. Sister and brother looked at each other wondering what had just happened. The girl started to panic, and the young man asked her not to worry because it shouldn't have hurt her. With tears in her eyes, Xiao Yu asked her brother not to worry because she had just never seen a piece of paper that glows. Comforting her, her brother suggested checking to see if there were any abnormal changes in her body, and asking her to concentrate. The guy asked what she saw. The girl closed her eyes and told her brother that she felt a star appeared in her chest. And not one, but 7, and that these stars were very strange. They created something like a black hole. Lu Shu took out a fruit, and the girl beamed. This is the first time she will try this. He had to help her, but before she could even take a bite, the fruit flew out of her hands and fell on Lu Shu with golden energy. His head began to smoke, and the girl climbed on him with glasses of negative emotions and tears because he destroyed her fruit. Lu Shu realized that Xiao Yu's body was repelling the star fruits. After receiving a slap in the face, he wondered why he had nothing at hand, and after feeding his sister tofu, he said that he needed to exercise. And when he left, he asked Xiao what actions her stars demanded. Maybe they needed to sing a song. But the girl incomprehensibly asked why she had to sing something. She was tormented by the question whether she was now also awakened. And her brother, caught like a stone, answered only that he needed to be alone. Falling on the bed, our hero was tormented by thoughts of his sister, who did not need to sing a song about a little star. He just couldn't let this little fish surpass him. And lying in his bed, surrounded by the light of the stars, he thought about the 6th star that was supposed to light up today. The next morning, waking up, our hero felt success. But then it seemed to him that his body hadn't changed much. But deciding to check, he put his fingers on the table and took a large knife. Swinging with full force, he hit himself on the hand and the knife that was in his hands broke. Nothing happened to the young man's fingers, and he looked admiringly at his hand. Now he knew for sure that he had a level E. His sister had been listening to his screams since the morning and was unhappy. Knocking on her door, the young man asked if she was awake. He asked her to hurry up and check if her star chart had changed, and he said he would tell her everything. After leaving the room, a disheveled Xiao was unhappy. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. He asked her not to whine, because he already had 6 stars lit up, and he asked his sister not to be upset, because he could wait for her. Xiao Yu replied that her 3 stars were completely dark. Lu Shu turned into stone after her words. The baby seemed to him more sleepy than he was, and saying that nothing would happen to tomatoes, he offered to eat noodles. The girl was happy. Then he felt a little ashamed, but there was nothing wrong with the tomatoes. While picking tomatoes, he heard people and was surprised that there were guests in Lin's house. The young man asked Lin Yong not to give it back. He would send it back as soon as the ruins opened and inform the woman he was talking to about it the same minute. Our hero was thinking about where he could have seen this young man standing at the doorstep of the house. And then it dawned on him, it was a guy from the festival. But why did he come to their house? Then the wind seemed to push him away, and the young man wondered what was so powerful in this house. Lu Shu looked at the young man who was passing by him. The young man saw that they were looking at him. Lu Shu did not understand why he was doing this. There was no need to turn around in his direction. And having decided, our hero, that he did not want to get involved with the stranger, began to leave, but the guy asked him to stop. Lu Shu did not understand what the mysterious stranger wanted from him, perhaps a fight, and if so, whether Lu Shu could defeat him. The young man was approaching our hero and pulling his hand towards him. Lu Shu decided that he wanted to attack and dropped a bowl of tomatoes. The young hedgehog just stretched out his hand to shake it and say hello. After greeting Lu Shu, the new acquaintance said that he was glad to see the young man. He knew that today he was prepared. He said he was glad to see Lu Shu, and our hero again asked the same question as last time, how glad his new acquaintance was to see him. And the guy immediately asked Lu Shu how glad he was, because he was glad. Then Lu Shu decided to ask what his new acquaintance was happy about. The guy did not expect such questions and was not ready for them. Lu Shu thought about the energy in the room next to him. It was very strong, although it could not be seen, but it felt good. And collecting his tomatoes, our hero decided that it was time to go. He couldn't leave this place unattended for long. The new acquaintance stood rooted to the spot and looked at the young man picking his tomatoes. Lu Shu returned home. His sister attacked him with a question about why he took so long. Then the young man asked her to be quiet, because they had an awakened one outside the door. The girl asked about the old man. Our hero replied that the case smells fried. He has never had such a feeling as now. The sister said that Lu Shu looks like a bigger guy from gangster movies who hides to heal wounds. She asked her brother not to be afraid, because the girl was going to train hard to protect him. The young man thanked her. They had been hiding for so long, but now, after today's events, they could be exposed and then people would find out. The next day, Lu Shu patted Xiao on the head and said that he was leaving, and she needed to stay at home. The girl waved after her brother. Lu Shu thought about his life. Will he always sell tofu? Then he felt a powerful energy. The white-haired man was training. It was so powerful, Lu Shu thought. It was very similar to level B strength. The man, seeing the young man, laid down his sword and said that brother Lu Shu had returned early today. The young man asked his uncle what he was doing now. The uncle replied that he was training his style of swordsmanship. For the young man, it was already clear. And about to leave, his uncle stopped him. He needed to learn something from the young man. The woman who was next to him looked at Lu Shu. The uncle did not want to take up much of the young man's time. The young man asked what happened. Then the uncle asked to pay attention to the sword in his hands. The young man replied that the sword was long and sharp. The points of negative emotions were added. But the man was serious and asked him not to interrupt. With this sword, many things in the world become much easier. My uncle began his story. But the effect may turn around, and the energy of rivers and mountains will return back to nature. The young man listened attentively. Wanjian Xianzong's sword. And holding out the sword, Lu Shu asked, as a young man, does he want to learn? But after hitting his uncle on the head and receiving points of negative emotions in response, the young man said that he did not want to and said goodbye. Uncle did not understand how he dared. The woman next to him calmed him down, saying that people did not want to study now. But looking sadly at his sword, Uncle Lu Shu said that he had too little time left. He could not afford to lose this technique, and heir had to be found. Lu Shu, walking through the city, thought about what he was pleased to hear and if there was such an opportunity, then he would like to become his disciple. Just like that night, and why the old man was so offended, even when he had already gone so far. The points of negative emotions continued to increase. The school cafeteria. Everyone was sitting eating. Lu Shu thought that he had earned a total of 3,000 points of negative emotions. Sipping a drink from a glass and eating his lunch, he thought about how difficult it was. Then a classmate came up to him to show him something cool according to him. The video that was re-uploaded. It was a good opportunity, the young man told Lu Shu. The awakened foreigner advertised a football team. Lu Shu thought to himself about how fat the guy was. And then the classmate said that many large companies sent very lucrative offers to the awakened and that they did not often get such opportunities. Then Lu Shu asked what his classmate was doing, to which he replied that he wanted to move mountains. His company was also ready to invest in this business. And I asked Lu Shu if he would like to engage in the selection of awakened ones. He knew that Lu Shu was living in poverty and his family had nothing else besides his stall. Then Lu Shu asked the young man if he knew Lang Jingru. The young man replied that he did not know. Then Shu continued and asked a classmate where he got such a positive attitude from. Points of negative emotions immediately increased. The guy was angry at our hero, and deciding that there was nothing more to talk about with the young man, he left. Then the rest of the students began to make fun of him that Master Lu Shu could not even make one friend. Lu Shu's house. The evening after school, the young man was picking the fruits that were in front of him and eating them, caught his sister's displeased look at him, and asking her why she was looking like that. He immediately replied that she could not eat them, and she did not understand where he got so many of these fruits. But he didn't reveal all his cards. After all the puppets around him brought him constantly points of negative emotions. After eating a lot of fruit, the young man began to dry out and he decided to go out, saying that he would watch a cartoon with Xiao a little later. It was an interesting feeling for him. There was some kind of energy unknown to him until that time in his body. Was it 7 stars? The energy of the cosmos was everywhere, and they revolved around the star that appeared last, trying to touch the brightest one in front of him. A dark energy appeared. The young man did not understand what it was. These 7 stars held a sword, and he tried to reach for the weapon that the system provided, even though it was not entirely reliable. And grabbing the weapon, he felt the power. There was a dagger in his hand. Is this dagger really the 7 stars that formed in the soul of a young man? Lu Shu had a very strange feeling, because this dagger reminded him more of a stationary knife, trying to handle a weapon, the guy thought. Xiao was watching all this from behind and called the young man. He did not pay attention to the girl and thought that now he would need to learn fencing or something similar, like grandpa neighbor. Then Xiao couldn't stand it and jumped on the young man with the words that she wanted to watch a cartoon. And the young man, calling the girl a little torturous, dropped his dagger and agreed to the viewing. Meanwhile, people in robes were jumping on the roofs of the Moon City. Their eyes were glowing, and one of them noticed a suspicious person. Another said it was just a civilian and did not pose a threat. Auntie was looking at the people in robes, and they went on. One of them gave an order. No one was allowed to move without his order. Auntie was standing outside the house, and Uncle Lao Lai realized that the time had come. A man in a robe entered the territory. A fire was burning around him. Then Lu Shu, taking the remote from his sister, heard that something was happening on the street. He felt more energy than usual. Looking outside, he saw a man who was very strong. Lai Yong stood and looked at him. Xiao Lai also went to the window and wanted to look. The man saw that he was being watched, and our hero realized that he had been spotted and hid under the window. The man told Lai Yong that after studying Naiting completely, he came to see Mr. Lai. Lu Shu was thinking about his uncle neighbor, who was hiding from enemies. Lao Lai greeted the esteemed Tian Luo, who came to visit them, and asked him to go into the house. Our hero was surprised to hear this. Tian Luo Dai Wan, state organization. There were a lot of people in this structure, and Tian Luo was also part of it. There are very few members in Tian Luo, less than 10. Everyone has a level of at least B. It was a kind of brotherhood. And the best is Tian Luo. He was the strongest of them, a new friend at school told our hero. And Lu Shu decided to remember this name. Sitting in the kitchen and waiting for tea, they talked about Reiki, which if restored earlier, they would not destroy the foundation. Lao Lai replied that everyone has their own way. Such open people as Mr. Li can withstand many trials of this world, said the guest who arrived, and Lao Lai wanted to discuss the proposal that was being prepared for him. The young man held out his hand and talked about the rejuvenation effect, considering whether Mr. Li wanted to join their fraternity. The guys at this moment were trying to eavesdrop on what was happening behind the wall. The last place in the organization was still vacant. Mr. Li coughed and said that he was sorry that he was now seen only as a lousy old man who could get drunk even from a glass of water. The structure of his and Tian Luo's bodies was different, Mr. Lai said, and he wanted to spend his old age in peace and tranquility. Then the young man stood up and talked about Nai Mu, who was a little desperate when he compared himself to Mr. Lai. However, Nai Mu should say that there can only be one director of the fund in China. Many relics have not yet been studied. Tian Luo guarantees Mr. Lai that as soon as they find the medical materials, they will immediately be delivered to Mr. Lai as quickly as possible. He hoped that one day Tian Lu would not meet with the Foundation in the role of opponents. The Foundation wanted to protect the world, and Nai Mu only these lands. Mr. Li raised his cup for respect to the peaceful year, and the young man said goodbye to him. All the robed men retreated. Lai Yong asked Lao Lai if everything was all right, to which he could not give a definite answer because it was very unusual. The next morning, Li practiced with the sword again. Then he heard that Lu Shu was saying goodbye to Xiao Yu and started his training. Swordsmanship is fascinating, Mr. Lai said to Lu Shu, who also believed that the young man was leaving early today. And hugging the guy, the uncle asked if he liked it and if the young man wants to study. Lu Shu replied that he would think about it, that he had some difficulties. Mr. Li said that everything would be fine. Any difficulties and problems immediately disappear on the way. Lu Shu imagined that his uncle would solve his financial problems. But when he returned to reality, Mr. Lai asked about the problems of the young man and was ready to help him with them. The young man just wanted to know what his master could teach. Mr. Li said that, for that matter, he knew astronomy and geography perfectly well. The young man was delighted, because if Mr. Lai would control Lu Xiao Yu so that she would study, then he would also be able to devote time to the art of swordsmanship. Then calling the fish, the young man replied that it was easy to find a common language with his sister. After leaving the house, she was angry and there was a dark aura around her. The girl asked what he wanted from her this time, and Lu Shu said that a little later Xiao Yu would go to the master and he would check her assignments. Points of negative emotions were added. Master Lai stood next to the young man who said that if Xiao Yu misbehaves, he will only eat tomato scrambled eggs for the next 6 months. Xiao Yu glared at Master Lai, who hoped that everything was fine with him, and after saying goodbye to them, our hero left. The sister and the master stood next to each other and were silent. After bringing the girl home, he asked her not to rush her because there was a lot of food. Mr. Lai was unhappy because he was a B-level expert, and the young man wanted him to be a babysitter. And putting down the table, he told Xiao that the class was starting. They sat down at the table, and after looking at her notebooks, Mr. Li could not imagine that the girl's handwriting would be so neat, and he thought he was teaching the right person. The next day, Lu Shu came out and saw Mr. Lai on the doorstep, who told the young man that from today he would perform strength exercises. There were bags of 15 kilograms and 150 kilograms in front of him, and Mr. Li asked the young man to take the easiest one first. The young man took a package of 150 kilograms. Mr. Li was shocked at how the guy easily tied the bags to his legs and asked how he felt with such a weight. The young man replied that it was not felt at all. Mr. Li told the guy that he was almost coping with his weight at the beginning of training. In fact, Mr. Lee himself was able to move to a large weight after walking with 15 kilograms for several years. The young man was inspired and asked what was waiting for him next. He really wanted to continue. Mr. Lee thought to himself that he had chosen the right person. He asked the young man not to worry and to begin with pass a small test and gave the young man a sword in his hands to make 1,000 swings. While he had to feel how every muscle changes at this time, he had to show everything that our hero is capable of. The young man thought to himself that the master so wanted him to learn the art of swordsmanship from him, and here it is. Mr. Lee said about a strong man that he cannot control his body perfectly. Then he is not a true strongman. And he asked, what does Lu Shu think? Who can become a strong person? Lu Shu believed that the one who could become powerful enough to ignore all the rules and laws could become a strong person. The energy went over the edge, and Mr. Lee asked the young man how he could become such a person. And taking a leaf, Mr. Lee cut the soil. The young man thought it was a sword and looked at what was happening in surprise. Mr. Lee thought to himself about how good he was. With only one sword, the young man will be able to cut the heavens with confidence. This kind of confidence is an instinct, namely, the instinct of strength. And these things required professionalism. The young man was happy and there were stars in his eyes. He couldn't even imagine that a real sword could do such a thing. Mr. Lee asked the young man, if one day he becomes great, will he want to take on great responsibility? Lu Shu answered no, because he was only responsible for living well and taking care of his sister. Mr. Lee couldn't believe how quickly the guy refused, but the young man continued, not only now, but also in the future, he was not going to help the others. Lu Shu considered life a struggle and therefore was not going to create illusions of high ideals for himself. Lu Lai was too naive when he thought that the young man would agree. He understood that the young man's fault was not here, that he reasoned like that, just life was not so simple. And then Mr. Lee informed the young man that from today he would no longer be able to be his mentor, but would still be able to teach him how to wield a sword. It seemed to the mentor that he could only pay more attention to the lives of others and slowly influence him. 2 days later, Mr. Lee looked at the girl and asked if the child had already given up, and asked Xiao Yu if she wanted to become a person who would help other people in the future. The girl looked at the uncle and replied that she did not want to. Then he replied that he had changed the light bulb for her. Xiao Yu talked about the old wiring in the house and that her brother had to replace it because the girl could have been electrocuted. And after telling Mr. Lee that he was a respected person, why he had to replace the light bulb, Mr. Lee fell from such words. Angry, Mr. Lai asked if Xiao Yu had already done her math homework. He was going to check it now. Looking at her work, he put himself question marks. The girl looked incredulously at the old man in front of her. Didn't he say that he knew geography and astronomy well? What was his problem and did he understand it at all? Mr. Lee lost his temper because she wasn't born yet when he was in private school. And then Xiao Yu asked how old he was. Mr. Lee proudly replied that he was 81 years old. And then Xiao Yu began to count and asked grandfather what he had been doing for another 60 years, if 10 years ago, when she was not born, he was 71 years old. The situation was heating up between them. But if he wanted to raise her, it wouldn't be easy. The same one thought to himself that he had not lived his life in vain. Then their battle was interrupted, and both of them, hot-tempered, looked at the young man who said he could solve the equation. Mr. Lee was not happy for the man that he came. The stranger also understood this. Addressing the fish, Mr. Lee asked the girl what to say if his old friend was in front of him, and she sent the stranger far away. Lu Shu was also thinking about Zujin, from whom he received negative energy points. And also at the top he saw from Lai Zhang and decided that something had happened to his sister. Sitting in class and thinking about it, he got up and told the teacher that he needed to leave. The teacher asked his student what happened. The young man said that he had registered on the official QQ website. It was a site for numerous messaging in China. And with that, the young man left, receiving points of negative emotions from the teacher. Running home and calling his sister, he saw Mr. Lee and a stranger, while his sister was sitting and just looking at how the men were throwing lightning between their eyes. Lu Shu asked who the stranger was and he replied that he was exactly who the young man was thinking about. Then our hero asked if he had come to fix the wiring, immediately earning points of negative emotions. Mr. Lai introduced the stranger as Tan Luo from Tan Luo Division. Without any potential, Mr. Shizujin. The young man replied that Mr. Lee's words had always been of great importance. Even if the foundation was destroyed, its founder and managers were still respected. The young people were very polite. Mr. Shi, using Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, created a dual ceremony to found the Taoyong class. Mr. Lai not only inherited Zhang and maintained a high position for so long, he was a role model. Lu Shi looked at the one who designed the lessons of the Taoyong class. 2 days ago, the students in the classroom were shown an exercise called the dual ceremony. Fei was going to tell them about the first part of the dual ceremony. At this moment she was holding one of the students by the head. This was the first article by Lion Yishin, Xuan Tai. The students had to complete the first one to move on to the second one. The teacher asked the guys not to worry. Everyone had different potential and therefore the speed of adaptation and cultivation will vary. Spiritual practice will require great perseverance. Everyone sat concentrating. The guys should have felt it when they came back. At that moment, Lu Shu felt the dagger rushing towards the light inside him and collided with another relic. While the young man mentally stopped the blade, if he broke what he wanted to break, then it would not be good for both of them. It seemed to the young man that it was impossible to train this exercise at the same time as the star map. This star map was too dominant. Other methods became useless against her background. The young man stood and looked at the two men in front of him, thinking that if Shizujin found out about his exercises, then the young man might have problems. Then she said that Mr. Lai had not yet introduced the young man who was in front of him. Mr. Lai also said that the young man just lives next door to him. He was a little brat with a potential of level F, a student of Mr. Shi, a student of Dao Yang. The young man wanted to pick up his younger sister as soon as possible and not interfere with them. And thanking my grandfather for his help, I decided to leave. Shu Zujin had doubts about the young man and his sister, whether they were just neighbors. Mr. Li sipped his drink and asked the guest what had happened. The latter informed him that there were signs of revival in ruins all over the country. These ruins are an integral part of the state, and he hoped that the foundation would not interfere in broad daylight. She reported that Mr. Lai, of course, could have killed him with his sword. No one was able to stop him. And Mr. Li, saying that he knew his business well, let the young man go. Shu Zujin thanked Mr. Lai and named the 9th place Tianluo where he would be expected. Li spoke of himself as a decrepit old man who no longer had that energy and spirit. The young man was smiling at him and was ready to offer his help if Mr. Li could not solve the equation. And Mr. Li chased the young man away. Li Shu was cooking. Xiao Yu came and told her brother that the old man treated the young man disrespectfully. Mr. Li couldn't even solve the binary law equation, and she said that Lu Shu was definitely the best cook and that she would help him next time. Then the hero explained to the fish that his grandfather was protecting him. Mr. Li was constantly surrounded by serious people, so the best defense is to hide his strength. Then the girl decided that it would be better to treat Mr. Li. The brother believed that the girl did not need to be too polite to look good, and in his heart, the young man was waiting for him to be able to get points of negative emotions of the fish. Too polite? Not this time. Then Mr. Li knocked on the door and informed the fish that he had solved her math example. The young man opened the door, and grandfather handed him the papers, and he asked what the young man with his F-level potential was afraid of. That's just the guy was not F-level, and grandpa told him about it. In his hand, Mr. Li held a sodium-potassium alloy, which was used to determine the level of potential. He and the other students had to be told about it in the Dao Yang class. The young man replied to the old man that he had already passed this test and had an F-level, so he thought it was not worth it. But Mr. Li gave the young man the alloy and asked him to tell him the results tomorrow morning with these words. The old man left. The young man held an alloy in his hand, and the sister standing next to him asked what to do and whether her brother would reveal the truth to her. The young man immediately told the girl to take a test, and then to chat. It was night outside and both the brother and sister were watching, not understanding what kind of level it was in front of them. The solution exploded. The next day the sun was shining, and our hero was standing behind the counter. A man ran up to him and asked about the smelly tofu, and opening the box, the young man happily replied that he still had a lot of tofu. The man wanted to take one, but Lu Shu replied that the tofu was not for sale. The angry man left, giving points of negative emotions to our hero. The young man thought that he needed more points for development. Fortunately, negative emotions directed to the fish were also taken into account by his system. Therefore, Grandpa Li needed to hold on. At that moment, Grandpa Li sneezed. Xiao Yu suggested that Mr. Lai take medicine if he was ill. For Mr. Li, it was not scary. He was interested in the test that the girl and her brother took last night. She was asking why the old man didn't ask Lu Shu about this in the morning, and she answered that her brother was also at the F level and she was a little better. Mr. Li, looking at the girl, understood that she was lying. The potential of these children, as Mr. Li believed, was unique, but they still did not trust him. At school, everyone was talking about the genius, the head of the class. Sitting down in his seat, Lu Shu talked about what the guys could hear, what they were so passionate about. And then I noticed a young man who was sitting with a green onion. Then the blonde neighbor replied that there is an aura in the onion. It helps with cultivation when you eat it. Last night, this young man moved on to the next stage, so now all the guys were celebrating. Lu Shu was surprised that the young man moved to the next stage so quickly, because it was said that the B level would need 9 days for this. Then the neighbor said that the parents bought the young man a piece of blessed land and therefore his training accelerated 2 times. But the blessed land was not as good as it was said to be. It was possible to suffer from it. Then calling his neighbor teacher Zhang, Lu Shu wanted to learn more about the blessed land. He told the hero that the blessed land corresponded to its name. These are some places filled with aura. Not only would people's training be more effective, it also affected plants and animals. Of course, the blessed land was also divided into good and bad. In a land like the Liu Lai family, the aura was not completely pure, so after a certain period of time, it could harm the body. A young man noticed that it turned out that his neighbor had also almost moved on to the next stage. And if our hero was not mistaken, did the neighbor have a B level? The young man replied that he had already done it for 2 days. The blessed land in his house was a little better. Lu Shu thought to himself about the young man who had high level potential and knew a lot. This guy was different from the others. The guys asked to show how it is, to move on to the next stage, and Lu asked everyone to look at him. But he didn't see anyone who could compete with him in arm wrestling. Lu Shu asked, "What about him?" And he agreed. All the guys were watching. The headman believed that he should have won, because Lu Shu usually shamed him in everyday life. And they started the battle. Lu Shu defeated the headman in a matter of seconds. He looked in surprise at his hand that was lying on the table. Liu Lai's points of negative emotions were off the scale. Lu Shu apologized to him, said that his left hand was stronger and offered to compete on his right. But also on the right hand, Liu Lai lost to the hero. Lu Shu celebrated how the power overwhelmed him and said that perhaps he had awakened with physical strength. And taking the headman by the hands, he thanked him. This was called a logical awakening. Sitting down in his seat, the young man's neighbor asked if he had really woken up. The young man, scratching his head, replied that he did not understand what had happened to him. Suddenly, he felt energy in his body, and then he woke up. And the blonde advised his friend to say at the evening lesson that he had woken up. Evening came and Faye already knew about the awakenings. In her hand, she held 2 stones B-level potential resources that can increase the effectiveness of cultivation. But independent awakened ones can also receive 2 stones every month, she explained. The young man looked at the stone and realized that although the spiritual stone was cool, but he could not use it with his aura, it was useless. The blonde man approached the young man and asked him how he was, because he had not lied to him. Then it dawned on our hero. And he said that he had a serious business with his neighbor, and he asked if the young man was interested. The young man offered his friend to buy a spiritual stone that was not broken and not painted in perfect condition, holding 2 pieces in his hand. The guy exclaimed that they were controlled by Tian Liu of China, and selling the stones would entail punishment. The spiritual stone could save the hero 2 weeks of cultivation. Why would he sell it? The young man asked his friend. Here Lu Shu pretended to be poor and unhappy in front of his friend. He told him that he and his sister were orphans and their finances depended on his morning sales at the market. But Xiao Yu has to go to school this year, and for this brother needed a lot of money, the young man told with tears in his eyes. The teacher said that the young man should study well, but Lu Shu also understood that he had to feed his family, and the effectiveness of his training was not enough. In addition, every month the independent awakened ones have 2 spiritual stones, and they will be distributed next month. The young man, looking at his friend Li, was very saddened by his story and agreed to help him. Li realized with a grin that his plan had succeeded. Looking into the phone, his friend saw that one such stone on the market cost 100k, if he could find someone for him who would buy for 120k. A large sum sounded in Lu Shu's head, and it was not surprising that the transportation of spiritual stones was accompanied by an army. If they were stolen, then the losses would be millions. And Lu Shu agreed to the deal by shaking hands with his comrade. Night came. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lu Shu counted his balance. The balance sheet contained an amount consisting of 6 digits. He already imagined what he could do with this money. But then he remembered Xiao Yu, who always wanted to live where they were and call this place her home one day. And remembering this, he dialed the number on the phone, deciding to find out if the house was still being sold. The next morning, the hero trained with a sword. Mr. Li taught the young man the basics he needed to remember. The martial arts fighter who develops his perseverance becomes invincible. In his mind, Mr. Li thought that the guy was doing 1,000 swings of the sword every day and continued to do it. The day will soon come when the water reaches the canal. And turning off the radio, he announced that the training was over for today. The young man, having called Mr. Li, wanted to ask him something. Wiping the sweat from his face, the young man asked his grandfather why the training should take place at 3 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Li replied that it was a long time ago. He told the young man that when he was training, his master's cocks woke him up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Then the young man was interested in the following factor: why grandfather always included the same song during training. Then he replied that this inspiration attacked him. Lu Shu was interested in when he would be able to learn new techniques. Then the teacher answered him that the art of swordsmanship is constantly changing, but a real master has only one movement in his head. The young man did not understand how he could learn a real technique. The teacher reminded his student that he had a level F. What else did he need? Or else the young man lied to him, and in fact he did not have an F level. The guy thought to himself about the old man, that he was obviously cunning. To find out the real level of our hero's potential, Mr. Li has prepared well. Then, making a fool of himself, our hero began to swing his sword and talk about hard training, and Mr. Lee just watched his reaction from the side. The sun was already shining outside, and the young man went to wake his sister. Seeing his sister with bruises under her eyes, the young man thought about what she was doing at night. The girl said that the old man was to blame for everything, who gave her a homework assignment in which there were 10 binary equations. Lu Shu was proud of his sister for doing her homework. Then he suggested that she clean up and they would go for a walk after that. Arriving at the mall, Lu Shu dressed his sister in the most beautiful dress, bought her a new phone, and they played a slot machine where you can pull out a toy. You didn't understand what was going on. Maybe her brother had done something, and now he was apologizing to her for it because he had never behaved like today. For the girl, this day was like a gift from a TV drama. Then she rushed to her brother and shouted that he could not leave her. The young man was in shock, and people passing by thought he was not the best person. But after patting his sister on the head, the young man asked her to watch less TV, in which there was no useful information. And he told the girl that he had bought a house, so from that day on they would no longer have to suffer. The girl was overjoyed and rushed at her brother again. You did not believe that her brother could buy a house. She asked if he borrowed money from someone and whether his words were serious. Immediately she promised not to eat any more harmful snacks and offered to earn money together and pay back all debts. And she also wanted to help her brother with his stall, sitting on Lu Shu's back. They discussed going to the cinema because King Rao Ming was shown today, and my brother also asked my sister not to give up her favorite snacks. The girl was happy. Lu Shu, looking at his sister, was also glad that they finally had a home. The next day our hero trained with a dagger. He ordered the bloodhound to obey his will, and throwing it aside, he ordered the dagger to find its target and deal with it. After that, the young man was glad that he masterfully mastered the art of the sword when the dagger pierced the back of the chair. The sister, seeing this, began to tell her brother that furniture is not a toy and that you can't do that. The girl, sitting on a chair and looking at her brother, asked to cut another pear and 2 apples with it and remove the skin from 6 oranges. He, obeying her right now, was going to do everything she asked. The girl looked at her brother, and he also thought that she was usually always sleepy after eating. She looked at her brother and said that she was not sleepy at all. The brother said that, based on his experience, it was time for the girl to break through the next nebula. Maybe in this way she will be able to discover new abilities in herself. And looking straight into his sister's eyes, the young man told her about the possibility that could be opened to her. Namely, they could change their diet and then they would become careless. Both of them had food in their heads and they were insanely happy about what could be waiting for them. After setting the alarm and turning off the light, Yu went to bed, asking her brother not to disturb her sleep. Lu Shu was only glad that his sister was ready to go to bed. But she couldn't sleep at all, even counting sheep didn't help her. Then the brother sat down next to his sister's bed and began to sing her a lullaby. The girl fell asleep, and the young man continued to hum. Then it hurt him and something began to pull him back. It was a diary of a fish. What she was doing, the young man did not understand. Could it be some kind of animal? An owl or an eagle, or maybe a sparrow? It was a bird. After looking at the diary, a bird sat on top of it and began to flap its wings to carry away the workbook. The young man dropped the notebook from his hands, and the bird was already flying from the girl's bed. But our hero decided that he would catch it, but missed. Here, having fallen, he looked in front of him and suddenly saw his sister's head, which said that she had broken through the first nebula, which scared the young man terribly in the night. He was so scared, his sister almost gave him a heart attack. Then the same bird that the hero was chasing sat on his sister's head. The girl began to tell that she noticed a black hole in the star map, and then only thought about the sparrow in her dream. This was her ability. She wanted to take out the bird, but the black hole sucked him in. The bird was flying around the girl, and the young man looked at it all incredulously. Now the bird was hers and Lu Shu agreed with that. But unfortunately, the bird was only a soul and could not eat, Yu said with a puzzled look. Surprised by what his sister said, Lu Shu tried to find out how many souls she could suck. She also told her brother that she had tried, and a black hole can only absorb 1 soul. And when a new one comes in, the old one disappears. The young man realized that there was an opportunity to absorb other souls and then select among them. For example, useful domestic labor or something like that. Yu had no idea how this whole system worked, but her brother had her diary in his hand, and he asked her to try because it was possible. And then the question arose where the young man was heading so late. He was going to find an experimental substance to capture the soul. The sister asked the brother where they had come. It was a very gloomy and smelly place. Was the young man sure that they could stay here? This place was the refuge of the most evil creature in this world. The sister looked at her brother and incredulously asked him what kind of creature it could be. They were walking down a dark alley, and my brother said only that it would only be an experimental object. Standing outside the door, the brother asked his sister if she was ready and wanted to press the door handle, asking his sister about readiness. He shone his flashlight from the phone. Someone was right outside the door at that moment. The sister was fully prepared and waiting for what was waiting for her outside the door. Opening the door, sleeping pigs appeared in front of them. They looked pretty good. The sister, seeing the spectacle in the form of pigs in front of her, was unhappy that this turned out to be her brother's plan. Then the brother explained that the pigs would still go to battle after a while, and they needed a free soul, and he asked his sister not to give up. The pigs presented themselves to the young man in the form of a terrible gang that was looking at them with his sister, and he was scared and grabbed his sister and they ran from there. But suddenly the pig struck the young man and he flew into the air and fell, not expecting that it would be so hard with these pigs. One of the pigs was mocking them. "Sio, you said." The young man asked his sister what she wanted to do. Then the sister explained to the uncomprehending brother that she wanted to deprive this pig of her soul. The young man asked the angry sister to forget about the soul and asked what they would do. At that moment, the sister pointed to the piglet that was sleeping on the grass. He took his sister's hint. In the evening at their house, the brother asked his sister why she wanted to curb the soul of this little pig that they stole. The girl replied that this pig looked gorgeous. The young man believed that there was no difference how she looked at all this. There were no differences between this and real pigs. A black pig of incomprehensible appearance lay in front of them. The young man sat on the floor next to the pig and pointed at it with his finger, saying that a pig can be beaten with his fist, while the girl, sitting next to him, asked without childishness. But the brother kept banging his fist on the pig. The girl was unhappy and did not want her brother to do this to the pig. Then he decided to use a knife and immediately got points of negative emotions. And his sister was angry that her brother did not listen to her at all, asking her brother to stop for her sister's sake. She attacked him and then the young man's dagger flew out and hit the pig. She soared into the air and deflated. The consistency that had previously looked like a pig was on the girl's head. The brother, seeing this picture, tried to explain to his sister that it was just an accident. The sister was furious, and the brother knew that he was in trouble. Since then, he went and waited on his sister every day to earn forgiveness, peeling apples and bringing them to her, doing massage while she was doing homework. The young man had already begun to ask what he should have done to make the girl forgive him. Every day, starting today, he had to make an omelet with tomatoes for a month and then his sister would think about forgiving him. As this promise could be broken, the sister said, even without looking at her brother. Peeling apples, the young man understood everything, calling his sister a little tyrant. She continued to sulk. Then they reported on TV that there had been an explosion. It was reported on the news that the case of the robbery of the 20th bank by the awakened one that had just occurred reminded everyone. And the guys saw the awakened one that robbed the bank next to him. There were two more. There were people and reporters standing near the bank. One of the reporters reported that the robbers had been found. The man shouted into the loudspeaker that the criminals were surrounded and they needed to stop any resistance. He also asked them to surrender because they can't escape. Then one of the robbers took the car and launched it towards the police, saying that it was too noisy here and could anyone rob a bank quietly. Police officers, shouting that the enemy is very strong, began to run away. The robber shouted that the police were stinking rats and that was the difference between them and Lu Shu. The policemen fled in horror. One of them fell to the ground and asked for help. Someone jumped on top of the cars and then the policemen came to the rescue. One of the young men apologized for disappointing him and said that he was not one of the robbers and said that gratitude was not needed, but he needed for the policeman to do one favor. The policeman had to tell his people to evacuate the crowd and let the pros do the rest. And the young man with two more partners rushed to the defense. The robbers were discovered 200 meters ahead of here. It felt like they were going to blow the whole street to dust. The young man asked the western flank in the form of a girl holding letters in her hands to stop the robbers. She used all her skills. Her writing, catching up with the robber immediately, worked. At that moment, Lu Shu, who was running away from home, was going to take a look because something was approaching them, escaping from the ground net, but also making such big movements. The young man thought he was a D-level master. If it was true that Lu Shu would be able to catch them, the young man reasoned, jumping from the ground on the wall. Seeing how high he had climbed, he realized that he could jump to such heights. It was amazing. When he saw the battlefield, he realized that it was too busy here and if he went into a frontal attack, he would not last a minute and decided to look around. There were explosions everywhere, and the robber continued to run away, but the letters of the girl who attacked him caught up with the robber, who was obviously not happy about it because there was no end to them. The boss was asked to hide behind his younger brother. The explosions continued. The younger brother, as the young man called himself, used a stone against the girl's fiery attack. There is a lot of trouble with women. The girl was already in the air ready to attack again. The robbers communicated with each other and one of them could not stand on this damn bridge all the time. He asked his partners to find a way to fight back and then head north. The second one accepted the information and asked him to leave. He will deal with the rest himself. The third shouted that a gang of defenders was advancing. One of the robbers grabbed the car, while the others shouted at him to leave them, and they left. The girl attacked from the air with her fire techniques. The robbers lifted cars into the air. The girl defended herself, but then the attack hit her. Her partner asked if she was okay. A little wounded, she replied that she would live. One of the robbers grabbed the defender by the head, and the partners hurried to help. He was calling for help. One of the defenders asked to let his partner go. I'll give him 2 seconds to let him go, but it was too late. The robber replied that times had changed and now the world belonged to the strongest. And as for the weak, he believed that they should have died. The girl, seeing what was happening, realized that it would be bad now. The partner was ready to tear his brother into pieces. Taking his sword, he rushed at the robber. The girl's writings and her fiery attack also went into action, and the robber clashed with a young man who had a sword. Pushing it away from him, he told the young man that he was making too much noise. But the next attack was already from the girl, and the boss tried to hide from her with his hands. An assistant ran to help him. The escape routes were cleared, and they could accelerate. The defenders were ready to attack again. The girl concentrated her fire attack. The robber asked his partners to stop fighting and just bring him money to end it. Then the boss grabbed his teammates, who did not understand what he was going to do, and put them in front of him as a shield before the enemy's fiery attack. After that, the robber fled, and the accomplices remained lying on the ground. The defenders began to chase him. A group arrived by helicopter. The young man, seeing them, understood where the main events took place. They were looking for an object, and the search stopped here. Running, Lu Shu came face to face with the robber, but managed to hide in time that he did not notice him. Lu Shu was at a loss as to how he could stumble upon him, so he believed that he needed to disguise himself. Then the robber got a sword, which he did not expect at all, and flew off with all his money. He hit the banner. The opponent wanted to catch him alive, but the robber has already taken many lives, so according to the rules, the defender can kill him. And he shouted for the thief to get ready to take his punishment. But the robber tried to get up after attacking him and punching the banner and breaking it. He said it looked like he had to take his punishment here. There was Lu Shu behind the wall, looking at everything with frightened eyes, and he asked if the robber and the defender would believe him if he said he was out for a walk. And Lu Shu had learned a new technique of the star mantle, which could hide his true appearance, so the opponents did not understand who was in front of them. The robber was furious after that, and the defender realized that the thief was going to use the Force Awakening. Let's go back a bit. Lu Shu is happy, jumping from having mastered a new skill. Xiao asks why the brother is so dark and looks like a ghost. To which Lu Shu replies that this is the effect of Xingqian Sahya. She hides his appearance and the young man cannot be recognized. Therefore, the aura around him turns purple and no one sees the young man behind it. The events unfolded very quickly, and Teacher Fei was already late. It was not good and now it will be difficult. The thief has already applied the awakening of forces. This Force Awakening was too violent. The hero hid so as not to be hurt and watched what was happening. The defender also did not expect that things could turn out this way and reasoned that if this continued, no one would be able to cope with the thief, and asked Sibar to cover him. Going to the thief, the girl launched her fiery writings into the attack again. The defender asked to attack the thief again. Getting closer, he used the technique and was able to use the sword that was sticking out of the thief's chest. He, of course, did not understand what was happening. The defender took his sword, which wounded the thief even more, and shouted to his partner to react quickly and use this advantage. The thief who fell next to our hero asked his strength to reveal his true appearance and show himself to the enemy. Then he ran at the young man, shouting that even if he died, he would still take him with him. Lu Shu did not expect such an outcome of events. He saw the attack and it was sea-level power. Realizing that he would not be able to avoid this blow, our hero began to think about what he had to do, otherwise he could die in this case. Then he remembered Mr. Li's instructions that in order for the opponent not to win, he needed to focus on his feet and on the ground. Mr. Li said that you need to keep your legs closer to the waist and concentrate the strength in your hand. Everything should be under the control of the young man, then he will be able to do it. Lu Shu decided that he had to defeat the thief. Gathering all his strength into a fist, he went on the attack and their fists met in a powerful blow. Zybar felt a strong wind flow, had to turn away, and she could not attack. The defender, the girl's partner, even grabbed his sword from the strong flow of wind that came from two clashing fists. When he opened his eyes, he saw the thief screaming in pain. His arm was mangled by Lu Shu's blow. The young man was thinking about what strong attacks he could now perform. The defender demanded the young man to identify himself and tell him how he was connected with this robber. Lu Shu understood that he could not give himself away for anything and called a bloodhound to hide his true appearance. Then something bounced off the ground next to the defender, and he saw a flying sword. So the person who was in front of him was a masked C-class sword master, and he demanded him to answer who he was. After that, our hero disappeared. The thief was lying on the ground, and the defenders did not have time for the young man because he managed to escape. The defenders found out that today's guest could fight against a pseudo C-class, but at the same time he was afraid. There was a C-class pro hiding in the city and it was necessary to find him. It was night outside and Lu Shu asked the fish to wake up soon. The young man persistently knocked on her door with thoughts that most of the robbers simply could not survive today. Just one step away from the soul of the C-class with a rich catch this time. Then his thoughts were interrupted by a pillow that flew straight into the young man's face. Chewing feathers, he knew that his sister was unhappy. Lu Shu didn't win $1 million to rush and disturb sleep like that, his sister said. And after inquiring, the young man called his little evil to go with him again. It was connected with souls, and he knew one place. The sister prayed that this time it was not connected with pigs and went to sleep for her brother. The young man also yawned. The night, the moon, and someone said that it was confirmed. It is an awakened Class C. A council of 4 people sat at a table and one of them intended to find the awakened one, informing the others about it. The young man looked in front of him. Not understanding what was in front of him, his sister stood in front of a huge man who was behind her and asked why her brother was so surprised. Had he never seen a soul? The young man shouted that he was giving the soul to the girl not so that she would satisfy her secret fantasy, and asked the girl to dress this man quickly. Zio Yu asked her brother to cool down, saying that what the dead needed clothes for. The young man tried to tell his sister that she was still too young and should not have looked at the naked, while closing her eyes. Throwing her brother over her shoulder, she walked, singing merrily, and said that her brother did not know anything, because the most important thing in life was to be happy. The girl came up to the shower and started touching her. The brother called his sister and decided to show her the magic of his latest research. The young man had a flowered cloth in his hands, and the fish looked in surprise at what her brother was going to do. The soul was dressed according to the latest fashion. The young man asked his sister to look at this fashionable spirit. The soul was standing in a swimsuit in a flower. The sister, having knocked over her brother again, asked her not to anger her, but the young man repeated her words that the most important thing in life is to be happy. My sister said that in these rags her spirit looked absolutely out of fashion, and at that moment the soul took off all the rags. The young man and his sister looked at the man in front of them in surprise, as if he was obeying the girl's orders and she liked it. It seems that this spirit was deprived of any independence. Then his memory should have been preserved. And then the brother asked his sister if she had seen them. She always closed her eyes when she comprehended the creation of the world. Maybe, the young man reasoned, she should try to close her eyes right now. My sister liked my brother's thoughts, and she thought it was a great idea. And the girl saw everything. She saw all the visions of a bank robbery and the escape of thieves, because the soul that was in front of them was the thief with whom the defenders fought today. She saw her brother's punch and praised him, saying that the punch was pretty good, while his sister was watching the thief's memories. The young man again tried to dress him in rags. The sister threatened her brother if he continues to play with this piece of cloth, he may not talk to her anymore. The young man immediately hesitated and stopped. He realized that the fact that he could not dress him did not mean at all that he did not have the right to cover a certain part of him. His soul showed him an ordinary blue cloth, and the young man thought it was not cool at all. When our heroes sat down to eat, Lu Shu could not sit quietly on his chair, because there was a soul behind him that was very close to him. But he only handed the girl food, which, by the way, did not bother. She only thanked the soul for what he did for her. Leaving one girl with a soul, Lu Shu left, with a completely dissatisfied look. The inexplicable mistake only made him weirder, the young man thought. School, everyone is playing on the field. Someone looks at the phone, where the news discusses yesterday's awakened on the Wangqing Bridge looks gorgeous. Everyone said that he was C-class. The headman looked into the phone and was asked what he thought about it. The headman believed that he was only fulfilling the duty of every ambitious young man to punish traitors and eradicate evil. The young man replied. Lu Shu approached his friend and asked if there was anything new. The guy said that the sea-level people were really powerful, but so far even the smart networks have not tracked him down. Lu Shu was glad to hear this and relaxed. Then a neighbor told him that one of the agents from the capital had been sent to their city, and he was probably close to solving it. Lu Shu was a little shocked by what he heard. His friend continued to say about the agent that in the first place he decided to visit their school, and why it was their school, the young man could not understand. Lu Shu, having heard all the stories, hoped only that the agent had not come for him. And then he felt an aura field on the podium, which he felt only once when he met someone from the Liu squad. Then everyone was asked to line up. The blonde man asked our hero what kind of person he was. Their new director was here and he wants to give a speech. A man came to the podium and joyfully greeted everyone, introducing himself as the new director Lai Yishao. Lu Shu looked at the director and wondered if it was him. Then the director made a speech that the future of the country was in the hands of the younger generation and he hoped that everyone could, starting to stumble. He looked at his hand, but the text had already been erased on it and silence hung in the air. The director finished the sentence by saying that everyone should study hard, and now, after listening to this, they could disperse. This rule seemed to all the students present to be nonsense. The evening, the street, and the cries that Lai Yishao was tired of living. The demand sounded so that Fat Yishao did not return anymore, and all the kitchen utensils flew to the newly made director. The director, thinking that he would be a fool if he returned, and ran away. Only the cat walking nearby watched him run away. Luo City needed an undercover agent to deal with a mysterious sea-level fighter, so as not to arouse suspicion from the sought-after. They had to carry out the mission quietly, said the young man with glasses. Yishao had to take care of the transportation and food costs. Yishao was in business and promised to fulfill the mission, and ran away with the words that the guys were waiting for good news from him. But it seemed to them that they could not rely on him, looking after the fleeing. Ishio shouted that the ruins of Luo would open and it would be a gold mine. This world is huge, and he didn't want to obey the orders of some organization in the future. But then a tree flew at him. It was a cruel beginning. Standing on the stage under a lot of cameras, the director said that he cares very much about education for the younger generation, and he was here for this reason, among other things. Lai Yishao announced that he will now officially lead the Daoyong class. Meanwhile, in one of the quadrangular dwellings of the capital, a young man with glasses asked his neighbor what happened and why he was so angry. The neighbor offered him to see for himself, saying that he had made his biggest mistake in his life. The young man looked at the screen that his neighbor was showing him, and Yishao was showing off on the screen. The neighbor expressed that it was probably in his understanding in a quiet way. The young man with glasses was shocked by what he saw. Now Yishao was the director, and his welcoming speech was quite justified. He knew what to do, the young man said, and decided to eat his words. Lu Shu looked at the phone, and it seemed to him that this Lai was just making fun of his mission. He was clearly being put a little strange, Lu Shu thought, standing behind his counter. Then they came up to him and asked how much his smelly tofu was worth. The young man, as always, replied that this product was not for sale, but was an exhibition copy. Then the voice of the questioner seemed familiar to him, and he thought of Lai Yishao. Points of negative emotions were added from him. The director looked at the young man and waved his hand. He was interested in how the young man could have some samples of smelly tofu. For the director, it was something new. Then Lu Shu, passing everything off as a joke, offered the director a portion for 5 yuan. The director, sensing from afar, thought about how delicious it was. Li looked at him with bewilderment and was glad that he liked it. Then the director, telling the young man that he looked familiar, asked him if they had met before. Lu Shu, scratching his head, replied that he was only a student of the Daoyong class, and he watched Yishao's speech with his own eyes. Yishao realized that there was a student from Daoyong's class in front of him and told the guy that he could contact him if he had any problems in the future. Asking not to overestimate himself, Yishao asked the young man for a pair of tofu as a thank you gift. The young man did not understand what the hell. He even regarded the smelly tofu as gratitude. A spoon flew at the director, and he quickly managed to dodge it while Lu Shu stood and did not understand what was happening. It was a man from a nearby stall. He was angry at the director and informed him that Lu Shu was an orphan, and as a student, he nevertheless launched his kiosk in his spare time. He told the director about the little sister that the young man should support, how the director could rip him off just like that. Yishao, lying on the floor, apologized and asked the man not to do this anymore. And after this conversation, he handed the young man a bill, apologizing to him for not knowing about his situation and asked him to accept these 100 yuan as his apology. The young man looked at the money and told the director that smelly tofu costs 5 yuan per serving. Gave him the change of 95 yuan. After saying goodbye to him, the young man thanked the director for coming. The director agreed and, patting the young man on the shoulder, told him that he liked the guy because of his honesty and decency at such a young age, shaking the young man from side to side, who clearly did not like it. The director informed him that they would become friends and in the future they would still be brothers. And leaving, he said goodbye to the young man with words of support that he would succeed. Grabbing the first guy who came across, the director informed him that it seemed to him that he had met him before. Too, the guy was out of his mind, and the director asked if he was going bald. Putting on his cap, the young man looked at the director. The director reported that he believed that the superpower that the young man took was not cleared. Whether he would consider buying consecrated land. Only a 20% commission if he bought through him. The man who defended our hero earlier looked after Yishao and wondered if he was really the director. In Lu Shu's house, the sister was sitting on her last breath doing her homework. Mr. Li asked her not to pretend to be asleep, because the girl still had a lot of homework to do. Then the director came through the gate and said that he was here to visit Mr. Li and said that he missed him very much. The director asked who this stranger was who walked in his door. Yishao's heart was broken. and Mr. Lai, coming close to Lai Yishao, asked persistently if they had met before. Then Mr. Lai, looking at the man in front of him, began to realize that he saw a round head, ridiculous clothes, and realized that Lai Yishao was in front of him. Yishao was smiling. He knew that Mr. Lai would not forget him. It was a great honor for him, and immediately asked how Mr. Lai was doing, and Mr. Lai recalled some events related to Yishao. How could he be forgotten after that? In those days they were in the ruins, and Yishao, not listening to his comrades, pressed some lever that was actually a trap. Then he took the supporting column and carried it somewhere while everyone was running away and escaping from the collapse. After that, he, again taking a bag of something, was going to leave. Mr. Lai recalled all this, and Yishao would have known that since then Zhai refused to participate in all missions related to him. Then Xiao Yu exchanged glances with Mr. Lai. She turned to Yishao, informing him that when a friend visits you from afar, you must first upset his spirit and will, exhaust his muscles and bones, expose him to hunger and poverty, harass him with your troubles and failures, and then expel him after several punishments with a whip and a fist. Yishao repeated her words about punishment and horror and asked her not to scare him like that, because he is not that well educated. At that moment, Mr. Yulai and Xiao Yu high-fived each other on a successfully completed intimidation mission. Yishao wanted to report that they had found 2 skeletons that were walking freely in the ruins of Mangxian. These skeletons belonged to the early stage of the E-Awakened level. Mr. Li did not understand what his old acquaintance was driving at. Yishao, scratching his head, casually began to say that he had heard that Mr. Lai had been offered to participate in missions related to the ruins, and he was very sorry that they would not be able to explore them together. The old man replied that he would prefer to enjoy 2 extra years of his life. Evening, Lu Shu's house. Xiao Yu was eating rice and asking her brother why he looked upset. My sister said that the man from Tianluo had a nice chat with Grandpa today, and they had nothing to be afraid of. The young man, counting his glasses, could not call it a nice conversation in any way. The young man told his sister that the man was from Tianluo, and their secret with his sister would come to an end if he found out, and he asked his sister to stay away from Yishao in the future. The sister, with her mouth wide open, shouted that she understood everything, and the brother immediately fed her rice. Then his phone showed a message that an urgent gathering of all students of the Daoyang class was announced. At the border, one of the participants of Tianluo was walking, and there was someone in front of him who was surrounded by a fiery aura. The man replied that these ruins belong to all mankind. The man from Tianluo asked his interlocutor not to be nervous. He only came to tell something. The man decided to ask what the newly arrived wanderer wanted to tell him. The same took out his sword and said that any trespasser, and dissecting all living things with a sword, had to die. On the other side of the mansion at this moment was Yishao, looking at the man who was defeated and lying on the ground without breathing. He was thinking about a responsibility, forgot to ask the stranger how he got here. He did not expect that they would be so brave. It was unbelievable to him that the ruins attracted so many rats. Yishao looked at the sky and thought that in the future it would be seen, because the man could not come here alone, and went to the other side of the forest. The man who was lying breathless on the ground was wearing a medallion. A bird with burning eyes took the medallion from his neck and carried it away. A speeding car with tired students inside was driving through an area where there were ruins. Lu Shu asked the blonde man what was so special about these ruins. The young man replied to Lu Shu that there could be many treasures in the ruins, and told his friend to listen to him carefully. The deeper he goes into the ruins, the more various herbs, magical and spiritual tools he will be able to find. In the center of the ruins there is something called an eye. If someone gets to the eye, then all the ruins will disappear in an instant. But in any case, if someone gets into the ruins without certain precautions and permission, only death awaits him. Ruins have always attracted many masters. Then the driver announced that the students were on the spot. The guys got out of the car. Lu Shu was fascinated by what he saw in front of him. In front of him was a platform over which helicopters flew. The area was guarded. The young man decided that he could try his luck. The blonde asked the hero not to stand still and start training. Lu Shu asked a friend. It turned out that they had gone so far only for training. There is a very strong aura outside the ruins, so the students came here to use the opportunity and practice. Lu Shu decided to find out if they would enter the ruins. But a friend explained to the young man that, given their current strength, entering the ruins was tantamount to death. Lu Shu understood everything his neighbor told him and decided to go for a walk. Lu Shu thought about cultivation and remembered the song about the little star that he would have to sing in a crowd of people. It would be better if he was killed right away. In front of him was a beautiful starry sky and mountains. The teacher at this moment asked everyone to start training. There was the purest aura here now, and it was impossible to miss such an opportunity. Lu Shu went into the tent where the rest of the guys were changing. Looking at the others, he thought that he could not sing the song about the asterisk. But there was another way to improve. Everyone was sitting and cultivating. The commander was sitting in the lotus position. engaged in his cultivation. Then our hero sat down to him and invited the young man to talk. The same wanted to train and asked the guy not to approach him. Lu Shu replied that everything would be fine and asked him to continue training, and he would talk to himself, while the commander was already annoyed, and our hero was smiling. Here the young man unleashed a flurry of stories, for example about watermelons that he liked as a child, and the fact that his mother once invited someone to eat a watermelon at their house. Then this someone ate a watermelon and praised that it was very tasty. And then returning home, someone stepped on the peel of a watermelon and fell. At these words, the commander could not stand it and was furious that Lu Shu was carrying this nonsense, reminding the guy that he was an orphan. Liu Lai's negative emotion points were plus 999, which is what our hero wanted, having originally started all this. Now the young man could buy a star fruit for these points. It was his small victory. The evil commander warned the guy that if he distracts him again, he will pay for it. But the young man was not confused by this, and he again began to talk about everything in the world, preventing the headman from training. After that, the enraged headman chased after the young man. After finishing his concert and purchasing a fruit, Lu Shu ate it and felt the cosmos light up in him. Now he had almost D-level strength. The headman continued to look for Lu Shu and go out to him. He wanted to tell the young man how to behave. The hero thought only that now he would get a new experience. The commander was looking for Lu Shu, thinking that he was a turtle and could not move fast. The young man, coming out, asked why the headman was looking for him, and even so late. The headman was asking if Shu had the courage to fight with his commander. He was going to fix his hands by shaking his fist. The teacher, seeing their quarrel, asked them to stop. She suggested that they find out the relationship with the help of arm wrestling, if they had such a serious conflict. But then the young men would be obliged to shake hands and face off. Lu Shu had bothered the headman before, so the guy didn't care how, he wanted a battle. Lu Shu, shrugging his shoulders, decided to arm wrestle, so simply arm wrestling. A blonde friend of our hero looked at the guys who wanted to see this performance with their own eyes and asked to find a bigger stone. The friend was surprised by Lu Shu, who was somehow strange today, as it seemed to him, and the young men decided to arrange a duel. The teacher was the judge and said that it would be a fair duel, so she ordered not to lose heart if someone lost, and at her command they had to start their fight. And at the command started, the guys began to pull the strength of their hands. In a couple of seconds, Lu Shu defeated the commander and all the guys were shocked by this performance. The headman began to ask the young man if he had woken up, because his trouble was something impossible, and he asked to start anew. But Lu Shu also defeated the headman with his other hand. He could not believe his loss. The teacher, approaching our hero, asked him if he had woken up again, and all the guys behind him looked at him in surprise. Then the teacher sat down in the place of the headman and immediately lost to the young man. This time, everyone looked and was even more surprised. The teacher decided to ask if the young man's physique awakening really affected him. Then he simply replied that the weight was due to the blessing of the headman. The headman is the secret of his victory. Scratching the back of his head, said Lu Shu. And if the young man was no longer needed by them, then he would go to train. His friend the blonde went with him. The guys clung to the headman and also wanted to participate in arm wrestling. Like Lu Shu, the teacher stood and looked after the departing young man. The headman cursed our hero to himself, telling himself that this was not the end. The young man looked at the screen and saw a system message that he was suspected of fraudulent transactions. Points of negative emotions will be transferred to the account after verification. Talking to himself, Lu Shu said that he was not afraid of checking the system, that he could even lose if she found something. He asked to tell the system. At this moment, his friend standing behind him asked him not to think about other people's opinions. Now he was an awakened E-class among his peers. No one could compete with him. The young man should continue to work hard, and then he would become very powerful, the friend said, radiating positive energy at Lu Shu. Lu Shu agreed with him. The blonde man said that he would also cheer for his friend and ran away, saying that they would see each other later. Lu Shu was left alone, watching the beautiful sky. The sister was sleeping at home, and in a dream she called her brother. Waking up with his name on her lips, the crows in the sky flew away, and the young man felt something bad. All the students also felt it, as did the teacher. Then the director appeared in the sky, who asked everyone to leave the camp urgently, leaving their luggage and leave now, otherwise it would be too late. One of the students asked to look at the mountain. Something happened there. All the students looked towards the mountain in horror. Everyone was asked to hurry up and leave the foot of the mountain faster, to leave the camp sooner. The students ran. Someone stumbled and fell. But then the fog that descended from the mountain was already too close. Lu Shu was running at the very end, and then the fog was right next to him. The young man was calling his friend blonde Zhang Shui and reaching out to him in a request for help. But when the friend turned around, he no longer saw Lu Shu. Everyone was running away, but the fog was too close. Lu Shu, calming down, saw that there was earth under his feet. He wondered if it was an ordinary fog, and then the ruins of Mount Bagan appeared in front of him. The young man looked in front of him and talked about grief, because he did not expect that such a huge place could be hidden in Bagan. But then an axe fell at his feet, and a moving skeleton appeared behind it. Frightened, the young man began to back away, but from under the ground he was grabbed by the leg by the hand of another skeleton. The skeletons went on the attack, and Lu Shu, who took the axe, also decided to fight back, saying that Uncle Lu Shu does not like to eat grass. He threw the skeleton away. He also asked the second to retire, but the skeletons did not calm down and wanted to crush the young man. But Lu Shu only thanked him for his work and offered to pay back in the form of a blow to the skull. It seemed to him that the skeleton could only be destroyed if its skull was smashed. Both skeletons had F-level strength. The young man understood that if the students who had not yet awakened had met these skeletons, they would have died, and considering them not to be his opponents, he threw back the skull. But then a whole army of such skeletons began to come out of the ground and running away. The young man asked for forgiveness for disturbing their sleep. The skeletons were running after the young man, and he was surprised by this fact. He ran all day and all evening without a break. Stopping for a breather, he realized that he was very hungry. Seeing the woods in front of him, the young man thought that there definitely had to be at least some food. When he saw wild fruits under his feet, he decided that he had finally been saved. But when he picked up one of them, he saw that animals had already eaten this fruit. But since the animals ate, it was safe, and in any case it was better than hunger. The young man decided and pulled one of the bitten fruits into his mouth. Deciding that this was a wonderful delicacy, he looked around. The whole tree was covered with fruit, and the young man thought that it would be nice to earn some money on this. Deciding that he was lucky, he jumped with happiness. Angry squirrels were looking at him. The Squirrel King was sitting on his throne while he was being fanned with leaves. And then his subject came down to him, who was telling the king very bad news. The king lazily asked what had happened, and then the squirrels informed him that an unknown person had dared to steal their fruit. They decided to attack the young man. The fruit trees and fruits belonged to them, and an army of squirrels rushed to the young man to attack him. Squirrels began to throw fruit at him. The young man turned around and saw how the squirrel was shouting at him because he dared to steal fruit from trees and demanded to kill the young man without showing him any pity. Lu Shu looked at them in surprise. But then fruits flew at him, and the young man, shouting that he was not afraid of these rodents and taking away the fruits, said that he would return and deal with them. The squirrels were rejoicing. Now the young man knew how strong they were. It was not surprising to the young man that everyone was talking about the danger of ruins. It seemed that the ruins were full of spirits, but the squirrels certainly had a mind, the young man thought, running away from them. Then he remembered Shuya's words, that the deeper you go into the ruins, the better the relics. Until someone gets the eye of the ruins, no one will be able to escape. Lu Shu believed that he was being bullied, and he wanted to return alive. He ran through the forest with fruit and thought that he would definitely come back and see a little fish, his sister. He tried so hard to escape, as he did not notice that he stepped on a wolf. After that, he had to run away, apologizing twice as quickly to the fact that he did not want to interrupt his sleep. There were too many traps in these ruins, the young man shouted, running away from the wolf. Dawn came, and the students died one by one at the hands of the skeletons. The remaining young man, holding onto his pendant, talked about how he hated it all and, closing his eyes, prepared for the skeleton's attack on him. But then our hero came to his aid. The skeleton was defeated, and the young man was saved. Our hero began to fight again. The young man tried to help Lu Shu and suggested that there were skeletons behind. Lu Shu waved them off and asked the guy to take care of himself. The young man thought about how great Lu Shu was fighting skeletons, and after looking at him decided to take a stick to fight too. Lu Shu asked the guy what he was doing and asked him not to die right away. Since that Shu had found a weapon, he could now help our hero. And with a smirk on his face, the guy decided that Lu Shu would help. And so the two of them stood on a hillock and looked at the mountain of skeletons lying in front of them. The young man knew that they had to destroy all the skeletons to the last, but there was no strength left. Then the young man suddenly jumped away from Lu Shu and thanked the guy for the fact that without him he would have remained a corpse, while he kept clutching his medallion. Lu Shu thought about the fact that the guy in front of him actually survived. This young man got off with only scratches, while the others were already defeated. The young man asked if Lu Shu was okay. The same one said that everything was fine. He just stared at the young man's pendant that he was violently clutching in his hand. The pendant seemed unusual to our hero in the fact that the young man was constantly holding on to him, and also the fact that the pendant glowed bright red. The young man said that his name was Chang Hengyu, and this amulet that was around his neck was from his house. These skeletons were quite nimble. Holding the pendant in his hand, said the guy. Lu Shu looked at the young man incredulously and tried to find out how he was left without a single scratch. It was not just luck. Chang Hengyu, who was clutching his pendant, was a little scared, but Lu Shu patted him on the back and said that he was lucky that his amulet was strong enough, otherwise it would have been terribly difficult for him to cope with everyone. The young man told Lu Shu that he was worried about the skeletons and asked to go with him. Lu Shu agreed, because he was from Nanyang City and was known for his friendliness. The guy understood and replied that he was from Nanyang City. At that moment, Lu Shu became embarrassed. We had to stop and see if there were any treasures left. We had to hurry. It wasn't serious at all. The guy definitely didn't think straight. Probably Lu Shu had never heard the tale of Little Red Riding Hood. Our hero did not even notice the truth, namely, what is hidden under the essence of Chang Hengyu. Chang himself stood smiling and covered his face with his hands. But Chang, watching the fight and abilities, knew everything about our hero. At this moment, our unsuspecting Lu Shu was kicking the skull of a skeleton and thinking about equipment. Chang was thinking that the sudden appearance of our hero temporarily interfered with his plan. But this was nothing compared to the look on Lu Shu's face, shocked and surprised, just like those students before death. He was sure that the wait would be worth the spectacle that he was going to have. Lu Shu called his muttering friend after him. The same discarding his thoughts asked his new friend to wait for him and not go far. Chang thought that he wanted to teach the last lesson in Lu Shu's life, namely, not to trust strangers like him. Chang asked our hero if he had been wandering around these ruins for a long time and if there was something here that he also probably should have known about. Lu Shu, hugging the guy, told him to just be careful when he went through the ruins, because Lu had no idea how many wild monsters were hiding underground. Chang pretended to listen attentively to the young man. Then Chang decided to ask the young man if there was a way to somehow detect monsters. The young man advised to pay attention to the tiny holes under your feet and not step on them. Ahead, the whole earth was dotted with holes and Chang pointed at them with his finger. Our hero looked forward in surprise. Then Chang decided to use his plan, and while our hero did not see, Chang deliberately stepped on one of the pits. After that, he told the young man that it seemed to him that he stepped on one of the pits. Lu Shu, clutching his heart, was puzzled. Skeletons burst out of the ground, and our hero's new acquaintance ran in the other direction, while Lu Shu remained standing in place. Chang turned around, looked at the young man and thought that he now had the perfect moment to reveal his identity and let Lu Shu die. But then he saw that Lu Shu was running towards him and even overtaking him, saying that running was not the solution to the problem and that he was abandoning him. Surprised, Chang tried to catch up with his friend and understand why he did so. After a while, the young men sat hiding behind a large stone. They managed to escape from the skeletons. As soon as the distance increased, the skeletons stopped chasing. Chang looked at the axe, which our hero picked up again, and believed that the young man was strong only because of it, because it was only necessary to take it away and he would not be able to fight. Then Chang came up with a new plan and tried to take the axe away from his friend, saying how heavy it must be and that his friend had worked too hard, and now he wanted to help him and take the weapon away from him. Lu Shu, without giving the axe to Chang, said that it was not worth helping him because the axe was easy for him. But Chang did not give up and tried to snatch the axe from the young man's hands. But Lu Shu asked him not to run away. Standing with his axe, our hero suggested to his partner to go and sleep because it was very dangerous in the ruins at night and it was necessary to wait for dawn. He agreed. Sitting by the stone, Chang realized that he had not eaten anything after entering the ruins. He spent the whole day with our hero and could no longer restrain himself. But then he smelled the delicious aroma that came from our hero. Seeing how the young man eats smelly tofu, Chang's drool flowed. The guy turns out to have hidden the tofu from him and ate it on the sly alone. Then Chang began to get close to our hero and Lu Shu asked what he was doing. Chang also asked and clarified whether the young man had eaten smelly tofu. Our hero, chewing his piece, smiled and confirmed his friend's guesses. Chang was talking about tofu, how delicious it looked, and then our hero told Chang that he would like to ask him something. Chang looked at him intently. Lu Shu had various questions in his head, but he decided not to ask them, and thus Chang's points of negative emotions were added. Chang told the young man that he felt that he had a lot of food hidden there. Then the young man asked what happened. If his new friend wanted to eat some tofu, he understood him correctly, or he could no longer restrain it. He told Chang that he was not a beginner at all, and all this time he was pretending and hiding his true strength in order to kill him, and decided to confirm his words, said Lu Shu. Chang did not even deny what he said and asked how the young man guessed. Lu Shu began to explain that the young man himself looked weak, but there was not a single wound on his body. Plus our hero noticed the speed and strength that could rise and fade if desired. And the most important question that our hero asked was whether Chang was actually a student of the Daoyang class. Chang laughed and asked the young man why he had not said earlier that he had already guessed. He was tired of pretending. Distraught, he talked about a group of students that could not escape, and including Lu Shu, there were 20 heads in total. It was a very good result according to Chang's calculations. Then Chang took out a knife and rushed to attack Lu Shu. Lu Shu also got ready and stood with an axe, but Chang was very fast, and only then did our hero realize that this would be a battle for life and the loser would die. At that moment there was an opponent's sword near his eyes. But Lu Shu knew that he could not die and attacked Chang with his dagger, hitting him. Then Chang realized that the young man was sea level. The dagger returned back to the youth's body and Lu Shu asked Chang to attack. He was lying on the ground and did not move. Then for a second our hero decided that perhaps the enemy would not get up. But the essence came out of the young man's body and prepared to attack Lu Shu, but missed and hit the stones. Unfortunately for the young man, the light of the goddess lit up, as Chang informed us, with glowing eyes, holding a dagger in his hands. He informed the young man that he had underestimated him. Lu Shu was thinking that the bloodhound, his dagger had wounded Chang in the heart. Then why was he still alive? Attacking Lu Shu Chang. He asked him if the young man was wondering why his opponent was still alive. And if the young man begs him, then Chang will tell him. At that moment he attacked Li and threw him against the wall. Lying in ruins from the wall, our hero thought that Chang not only did not die, but his strength also increased. Then, attacking our hero again, Chang told the young man that he only knew how to hide. Lu Shu looked up, puzzled. Chang asked the young man about his sword, because it was clearly not his only trump card. Dodging, the young man noticed a shining amulet on Chang's body and it made him think. The amulet was an heirloom, as Chang had previously told the young man. Chang was wondering what kind of treasure his flying blade was. Then our hero offered to give Chang the secret of his flying sword, and in return he would give him the secret of his immortality, and then they would be even. But he was not going to give the young man his secrets. Lu Shu also guessed that his opponent's secret was hidden in the pendant, thereby greatly surprising Chang. At that moment, Li got very close and wanted to rip off the pendant, but he didn't succeed. Chang jumped back, holding onto his amulet. The young man asked if he had guessed correctly, and at that moment Chang realized that he was bluffing. But do experts give in to bluff? Li replied. By doing this, he angered Chang and he promised the young man that he would not have to guess further because he would be a corpse. The angry enemy went to attack our hero, but he only dodged his attack. And our hero, answering the question about the trump card, attacked Chang and saying that it was far from the last trump card, laid him in the ground. While taking the amulet from his neck, Chang shouted, but it was too late. Lu Shu broke the medallion in his fist. At that moment, the energy of the medallion ceased to act and the essence evaporated from the body. The young man stood and looked at the remains. His hand was shaking. It was cruel for him, and he still could not get used to it. Remembering Lu Shu's sister, he thought that if she had been there, it would have been much better. My sister, sitting on a tree, was thinking about my brother. If he was not at home, then there was no point in cooking an omelet with tomatoes for 3 weeks. In her hands she had a bag with various food. Looking at its contents and sighing heavily, she thought that they should eat it together. One was dealt with and he did not understand what was wrong with him. The monster pretended to be a man, but after breaking his amulet, he disappeared. The one who dealt with this monster could not even think of someone pretending to be a student. Another group of students, led by an excellent A-level student, stood and were ready to fight against a monster that was not human. One of the students asked about who could have sent this monster here to impersonate a human, to which the monster invited him to come closer and find out. The excellent student immediately rushed to the attack. She got close to the monster and broke his amulet. Everyone stared open-mouthed at how the excellent student dealt with the monster. The girl was thinking that they had to hurry up and report the situation. There were spies in the neighborhood and one of them was in Dao Yong's class. The registered students were dangerous. Lu Shu walked proudly on the ground. He was the disciple who made the order. The young man was heading back to the squirrels and their fruits. Stealing fruit from squirrels again, he ran away from them and teased the animals. The squirrels were angry and were ready to beat the young man, but he only quickly ran away from them holding fruit in his hands. Having reached the cliff and eating the fruit that our hero took from the squirrels, he thought that it seemed to him that there were people somewhere, which meant that he would finally meet the others and be able to finally get out of here. At the bottom, the students were running away from the skeletons and it seemed to our hero that someone had died. The guys ran past him, and the girl asked the young man to run too, but Lu Shu just stood with his head down. The guy who ran next to the girl asked her to leave him if she wanted to survive. Then there was no need to pay attention to outsiders. Only the fastest will be able to survive. Lu Shu went to attack the skeletons and dealt with them with one blow. The students turned around in surprise. Our hero continued to fight. The students looked at their battle and realized that the young man was from the Dao Yong class. He was strong and he had an axe from somewhere. Our hero continued the battle and the girl, looking at all this, offered her partner to help the young man. The same one said that the guy would be able to cope with everyone alone and even if he died, they would be able to take his axe. Lu Shu dealt with all the skeletons again and the guys came up to him. The guy spoke first and told Lu Shu about what an unexpected meeting it was and asked him to let him introduce himself first. But closing his mouth, our hero said he didn't want to know and he was leaving. Then a new acquaintance clung to the young man's leg and asked him to stay with them, because there was not a single skeleton anymore and suddenly the ruins would disappear later. To which the hero tried to move on and asked to stop talking and let him go. The guy did not stop and began to put pressure on Pity, asking Lu Shu not to leave them alone. Lu Shu saw this as an emotional blackmail. The students surrounded our hero like zombies and asked him to give them an axe. The young man simply gave away his axe, suggesting that they try to cope with it. And running away from the crowd of students, our hero suggested that they head in the opposite direction from the sun. There was a green town, there were fruit trees inside, and this could be enough for everyone. He wished everyone good luck and said goodbye. Running away, the young man thought that he was not a hero and that he just needed to get home to see his sister. One of the students, a girl, picked up an axe and asked in surprise why the young man gave it to them. And looking at the girl, the young man next to her asked about who exactly Lu Shu gave the axe to. All the red eyes were fixed on the girl who was holding the axe in her hands. A few days later, the only way to the center of the ruins. In the crevice, skeletons were riding horses. People watching from the top saw that there was something wrong with the skeletons. These were the defenders who had previously participated in the battle with the thief. The girl could easily figure out that the captain was the one with the skeleton sword on horseback. The man agreed with her, thinking that the girl was right, because that skeleton was the most noticeable. After they remove the other skeletons, the captain will remain vulnerable, the guy informed his partner. Then the partner asked if her partner, Tian Luo, was waiting for her, to which he explained to her that Tian Luo had gone after Class C spies who had infiltrated the ruin, and it was difficult to say when they would return, due to the crowd of students that were next to them. Their supplies were almost running out, and they needed to get through the canyon to the center of the ruins as quickly as possible, so he decided to help his partner kill the captain with a sword. It didn't give her any problems, and she was willing to help. Just as they were about to attack, they saw someone approaching. It was Lu Shu, who calmly walked towards the string of skeletons. Then the defenders thought that the young man wanted to rob the skeletons, and in general, where could this smart guy come from? The girl behind them, who was standing behind them, recognized Lu Shu in the new face. One of the defenders decided to help him. His partner shouted for Sibei to wait for him. Lu Shu was standing alone face to face with a skeleton and did not understand what was happening. Whether there were skeletons there too, but first he decided to deal with those in front of him and took out a weapon. The skeletons went on the attack, and the young man also began to attack. Deftly handling the weapon in two hands, he dealt with all the skeletons. Then he heard that someone was calling him and his teacher was in front of him. He was very surprised at how she ended up here. All the students were looking at the young man who was collecting spears from skeletons. Then the defender told Lu Shu that they would not take away his spears and he should not worry. But the young man did not believe them and said that he would not give up the weapon. Then the teacher also promised that they would not take it from the young man. Liu Xuan's points of negative emotions were added. The teacher asked the young man if he was alone. Then our hero started playing the fool again and told the teacher that he was sure that half of those standing next to her were scared and they needed his help. The points of negative emotions from Liu were added again, and an addition from Zai Bei. Then the girl turned to Lu Shu as a master and asked if he remembered her. The young man in response decided to ask what happened to her friends. Everyone was surprised, including the girl. And then she said that as soon as Lu Shu left the axe, the students literally began to fight with each other for her sake. As a result, skeletons attacked the company and only 5 of the students were able to escape. The girl sadly told the story. The young man wanted to give them a life-saving weapon, but everything turned out differently, Lu Shu thought to himself. While they were discussing the situation with weapons and students, another girl interrupted them and asked if Lu Shu knew where to get food. The young man took a fruit out of his pocket and asked the guys to look at this fruit, saying that it tasted juicy like a pear, sweet and delicious. Everyone looked and drooled. The young man continued to talk about the benefits of fruit, because it not only quenched thirst, but also restored strength. After exchanging glances with other students, the girl decided to put pressure on Pity and asked the young man to share with them because he had so many of them. Lu Shu thought that it was a bit rude of her. At this moment, Liu was calming the raging students who were very hungry. Then the young man came up with an idea. He suggested that the teacher distribute fruits to those who wanted to fight. And for the rest, 1 fruit for 8 should be enough to ensure the functions of the body. Everyone began to get rowdy and indignant, at the same time asking about where the young man had so many weapons. Then our hero decided to ask about the level they had. Wasn't it a B level? He decided not to take into account the F level, but those who had the E level would continue to hide under the protection of someone else. It was nonsense for him. Points of negative emotions from students were added. Then Lu Shu told his classmates that he didn't really need so many weapons and fruits, so he could sell them to them. A spear of 4 meters, with a sharp and long tip with 2 edges, it could instill spiritual power, as well as merge with the spiritual energy of the one who holds it, Lu Shu told the students, and then demonstrated how it works. Classmates and the teacher were delighted. That's why the guy got stronger when he used that spear. And Lu Shu suggested that the teacher also buy a spear. The weapon is a relic, genuine material. Our hero knew how to sell and offered it to the teacher, saying that she deserved it. Zaibe, taking the spear, reflected that she had not taught him this, but the happy hero was counting a bundle of bills. Then a kid in the crowd told Lu Shu that he didn't have any money right now, but he could give the money back after everything was over. The young man's eyes sparkled in looking at the guy. He asked him how much he bought his jade pendant that was around his neck. The young man said that he bought a pendant for 13K and whether there was something wrong with it. Lu Shu reasoned to himself about the weapons he had here in ruins and that they might have to be handed over to the government, so it would be better if he exchanged them for money. But no one would carry cash with them in places like the young man before, and Lu Shu had an idea. Putting the fruits and weapons next to him, he asked what the guy would change his pendant for weapons or for fruits. Everyone immediately rushed to give Lu Shu everything they had of value. Pure gold chains, an original Gucci belt, diamond rings and other things were used. Even Liu came up to our hero and after giving 2K asked to exchange it for something. Someone has already started arguing among themselves. Someone, putting cash, asked for a good weapon. A young man dug up an axe and the one who wanted a good weapon was indignant why he could only get a rusty axe. Then our hero said that the guys were not like Lu Shu and Yu. She was fighting, and they were just hiding, so for 2K he could only get a rusty axe. Here, points of negative emotions were showered on our hero's money. Then the young man, waving an axe near the young man, clarified whether such an exchange was coming to him. Being afraid, he agreed to anything. That's what it means to cheat, our hero thought to himself. There was a young man standing in the crowd and Lu Shu thought that he had a very good pendant, thereby confusing its owner. Our hero tried to find out if the young man wanted to exchange him for a weapon. He did not agree and immediately walked away from the crowd, holding onto the pendant. A few minutes later, Lu Shu, hung with the most expensive things, said that the guys still had 30 seconds to decide. Then inside he felt the knife vibrate. It was the response of a bloodhound. The young man decided he had not felt this before. Turning his head and hearing a scream, he saw a crowd of students who were fleeing from skeletons and entities that were flying through the air. Lu Shu packed up all his belongings and ran while everyone else was preparing to attack. The fight began, and our hero thought that mobs would be his payment, and he would continue his business later. Then one of the guys shouted to Cow King, an excellent student, to be careful. The girl was running away from the entity that was behind her. Our hero, walking in the opposite direction with everything he collected from the students, felt like the sword was pulling him in a completely different direction. The bloodhound pulled the young man so hard that he left all his belongings and walked right behind the call, asking the bloodhound not to pull so hard otherwise everyone would see it. The headman, fleeing from the battlefield, offered Lu Shu to engage in heroism as in fairy tales. Our hero, although he did not want this, but the bloodhound pulled him somewhere. Inside himself, the young man tried to calm the bloodhound, fearing that he would tear him apart, and he did not want to go to the battlefield at all. The students asked Lu Shu to cover them, and Lu Shu, running on the battlefield, exchanged glances with an excellent student who was running in the opposite direction. The girl looked at the guy in surprise. As soon as Lu Shu ran to the battlefield, the entities scattered in horror when they saw the bloodhound. All the students could not believe their eyes, because in their opinion Lu Shu did nothing to be afraid of him. Addressing the guys, Lu Shu asked them to believe him that he had done nothing, but of course no one believed him. The ghosts that were before were not afraid of Lu Shu's spears, and there was nothing to think about other weapons, our hero thought. But all the same, everyone ran away. Maybe it was because of the bloodhound, Lu Shu thought, touching himself at the place where the sword was torn from. The soul of the pig that his sister gave him was also destroyed by the bloodhound. It seems that the bloodhound was born to become a retribution for the spirits, and Lu Shu thought that in the future he could never be near the souls. But, fortunately, no one noticed it. Looking at the guys, he saw that the entities were attacking them, but they did not touch him. Seeing Cow King, our hero decided to ask if the girl could do him a favor. She silently listened to the guy. At the next moment, our hero was already dealing with skeletons, and the excellent student was helping him, waving her sword. She ran after the young man and asked him to speed up. Liu and Zaibe were watching them from afar, not understanding what those two were doing. Liu informed the girl that they were almost done here and they should leave. It was time to head to the center of the ruins. Going to the center of the ruins, classmates heard the voice of their student. There was a huge hole and light above their heads, but it was completely unclear how high they were to the top of the cave, and it was impossible for an ordinary person to climb up. The other Dao Yang classes were also here. One of the students was trying to see where the goddess was. The girl was walking next to Lu Shu, holding the guy's hand and showing something on it. The young man looking at them wondered why the girl was walking next to our hero. King also explained to Lu Shu in the palm of her hand that spiders and jewelry roam the web. And after understanding each other, the young man nodded and sat down on the ground, placing weapons next to each other. Our hero started selling weapons again, for cheap, and he also told everyone that he was ready to consider an exchange for precious materials. all look with incomprehension at your classmate. How could he make money in such a place and in such a situation? The guys saw Cow King, who was a young class genius. They saw the girl fighting side by side with him on Loyang Road. Winking at her, our hero explained that it was possible to gather everyone that way. As soon as she finds that very jewel, she will find a spy, the young man explained to the girl. Cow King agreed with him and understood everything. Then the guys started coming up and asking how much it costs. Lu Shu sold valuable items for 10k for one weapon, and so that there would be no fakes, everyone rushed to buy. Looking at the jewelry of the guys, the excellent student was looking for the one. She had seen no analogs. There were only ordinary jewelry everywhere. Someone in the crowd thought that the students were stubborn and naive.